The Adeptus Astartes defend the innocent from the galaxy's most terrible foes. Responsible for the safeguarding of crucial Forge worlds, tactical outposts, and even the Throne World itself, these towering angels man the walls of untold fortifications and bastions of humanity. For today, we shall elucidate the chapters of the Space Marines derived from the lineage of the vigilant Praetorian of Terra, Rogal Dorn, the successor chapters of the 7th Legion, the Imperial Fists.
Do not look to us for kindness. Do not look to us for hope. We are not the kind children of this new age. We are the rocks of its foundation. If you wish hope, then look to what we make. If you wish kindness, then look to those who will come after us.
The Legiones Astartes are the single deadliest armies forged by the Master of Mankind. Both the greatest defenders and mightiest foes of humanity, the constitution and strength of the Space Marines of his Imperium shoulder the great burden of humanity's survival. Yet among all the founding legions, one above all has garnered a legacy as the bulwark of humanity. The stoic bastion of the Imperium, the Imperial Fists. Holy Terra is the great bastion of humanity, though its resplendent present and once glories all stem from its savage origins. Once the battleground for 100 savage wars among the techno-barbarian hordes of humanity's past, with the ascendance of the Master of Mankind, order would be brought to the planet. His Thunder Warriors would purge the planet of the rabble of the Earth, and in their wake, a new breed of warriors would begin a new age of prosperity. To plant the seeds of the future, the soil of Terra would be nourished with the blood of the expendable Thunder Legion, and with the harvest of human potential ripe for picking, an army of angels would befit its protection. The Emperor would craft the Legiones Astartes and give to them many traits and duties to fulfill their role as the custodians of humanity's bright future. 20 legions would be made, yet one alone would be tasked as the Praetorians of Terra. Drawn from every civilization of the Earth, the 7th Legion would be formed of the promising youths with a hunger to act in the name of the burgeoning Imperium. Enduring the painful surgeries and trainings to transform into the Angels of Death, traditions and unifying traits would begin to influence the Legion's character. Seeking to not only defeat the foes of the Imperium, but to add their might to its early formation, the 7th Legion would make any sacrifice to ensure victory. Securing great victories paid in blood, the 7th Legion's creation of great bastions upon the soil of Terra would exceed 600 citadels within the first 10 years of their service. The perished Astartes of the Legion would be said to lie within the foundations of each bastion. The blood of their kin sanctifying the fortifications crafted by the 7th Legion. Replacing the old traditions and cultures of the disparate settlements of Terra, the palaces and strongholds built by the 7th would act as examples of the Emperor's vision for the future Imperium. Always moving from one task to another, the Imperial Fists would not linger as they enacted hammer blows to destroy their enemies and rebuild anew from their fallen outposts. Citizens would remark that the hand of the Emperor had descended and gripped with an unbreakable fist, to which the Emperor would derive the 7th Legion's new name, the Imperial Fists. Bestowing the laurels of victory upon their heraldry, the dutiful and stoic warriors of the 7th would accept such favor with grace and silent dignity. For soon, even greater glories would be inherited from the Imperium, with the reunion of their Primarch, Rogal Dorn. The Primarch of the Imperium would be discovered upon the icy death world of Inwit by the House of Dorn. Orbiting a dying star, the planet of Inwit, despite its harsh environment and hardy people, would show evidence of a once proud citadel within orbit. Dormant voidcraft watch silently above the pearlescent body of snow and frost, and bear witness to the ascension of the boy who would be known as Rogal Dorn. The peoples of Inwit braved the immense cold and feral beasts of the world within ruling clans that had once claimed dominion over the entire sector of their surrounding system. The ice hives of the planet, led by warlords and matriarchal figures, ruled their people with shows of technical prowess, such as orbital defense stations, trade, and void-worthy armies. The young boy would be adopted by the elderly patriarch of House Dorn and would be taught self-reliance, the responsibilities of ruling, and a wealth of life lessons which would mold the young Primarch into the indomitable man he would swiftly become. Quickly growing in stature and influence, Rogal would with time lead House Dorn into a new golden age of prosperity. Mastering diplomacy, strategy, and empire building, it would not be long before Rogal Dorn rose to become the Emperor of the Inwit cluster. His adoptive grandfather would eventually die from old age, yet rest peacefully in the knowledge that his most cherished inheritor to his house's legacy would become an ever stronger and virtuous leader. Cherishing his grandfather's memory, on the days which Rogal Dorn would sleep, he would rest with a keepsake of his guardian at the foot of his bed. A fur-edged robe, once belonging to the Patriarch of Dorn, would comfort Rogal during his time of grieving and serve as a reminder of his duty to uphold his mentor's legacy. An exemplar of Inwit's culture, Rogal Dorn would rule Inwit for 40 Terran Standard years until the arrival of the Emperor upon his homeworld. Ever diligent with curiosity for the mechanics of technology and expanse of his empire, Dorn would meet the Emperor's incoming fleet at the head of his restored flagship, the Phalanx. The single largest vessel known to Imperial space, the Emperor would be immensely proud of his son's accomplishments. Already the ruler of a star-spanning empire and capable of reviving a long-dormant relic from the dark age of technology, Rogal Dorn had proven to be among the most resourceful of any Primarchs ever discovered. Greeting the Emperor at the helm of the Phalanx, Rogal Dorn would be welcomed into the fold of the Imperium. Bequeathing the immense space station to the Emperor, the Master of Mankind would years later return the Phalanx to Rogal Dorn, outfitted as the mobile fortress monastery, housing his own Space Marine Legion, the Imperial Fists. Installed as the leader of the 7th Legion's armies, Dorn would command his legion in his quest to recover the long-lost legacies of humanity. Initially observing his Genesons with silent judgment, Dorn would not engage them in conversation during their initial pledge to follow his commands. Dorn would watch them in battle, and after deeming them worthy of respect, engage them in conversation. There was much to do to improve the Imperial Fists to the standards that Dorn demanded, yet there was undeniable strength within them. Giving a single word of thanks to the Master of the Legion, Matthias, Dorn would command his men to form 30 regiments from the initiates drawn from Inwit, and for 6 solar decades, mold his legion into his own image. Unable to lie to his peers, and embodying the greatest virtues of the Imperial truth, Rogal Dorn would stand as one of the single most venerated figures in Imperial history. Revered by the Ultramarines, Lunar Wolves, and other Storied Astartes legions, the Imperial Fists would serve with an untarnished reputation as loyal servants of the Emperor. Horus Lupercal, Primarch of the Lunar Wolves 16th Legion, would remark, "If ever I laid assault to a bastion possessed by you, then the war would last for all eternity. The best in attack, matched by the best in defense." Victorious in innumerable conquests and compliances throughout the stars, the single-minded discipline instilled within the 7th Legion would prove exceptionally effective. Rogal Dorn would prove to be a genius in the arts of strategy, and though a cold and humorless Primarch, the rage of the Praetorian of Terror would be infamous. With Leman Russ, Primarch of the Space Wolves, remarking that Dorn's rage was as swift and unforgiving as the falling edge of an axe. Dorn's uncompromising idealism would often cast his legion in a dour light. Stone-like in their demeanor and unyielding in their duty, fractious relationships with other legions would inevitably ensue. The Iron Hands and their Primarch, Ferrus Manus, would join the Imperial Fist during a joint campaign so brutal that it would cause a near unreconcilable schism between their ranks. The Emperor would recognize Dorne's legion's affinity for fortification and task the Imperial Fists to construct bastions within the Imperial Palace. Sending the Iron Warrior's Primarch, Perturabo, into a fit of rage, the jealousy of the Lord of Iron would be clear to even the Astartes of his own legion. The two Primarchs would from this moment on never see eye to eye and refuse to cooperate in future campaigns. The stubborn nature of the 7th Legion, combined with their near-flawless record of deeds, would foster resentment amongst their rival legions, which would be further reinforced during the dark days of the Horus Heresy. With the conclusion of the Ulanor Crusade against the Orc menace, Primarch Horus Lupercal would be installed as War Master of the Imperium. The Emperor would return to Holy Terra to attend to his revolutionary Webway project and task the War Master with continuing the Great Crusade in his stead. Though several Primarchs would balk at their own dismissal for the position of War Master, Rogal Dorn would accept the Emperor's decree with no hint of resentment or bitterness. Ever loyal to his brother, Dorn would idolize Horus for his unquestionable pedigree and deeds made in the name of the Imperium, and see to aiding his might in the further conquest of the galaxy. Ever a trusted advisor to the War Master, Dorn's glories were eclipsed solely by Horus, and his resolute nature would be a boon when contrasted with Horus's innate charisma and charm. His counsel imparted to the War Master, Dorn and his Imperial Fists would be recalled to Holy Terra to garrison the Throne World as the Emperor continued his experiments within the Eldar Webway. Yet with the absence of the Imperial Fists, the War Master would slowly be enticed by the temptations of the ruinous powers. Enacting the purge of the loyalist elements within his own legion and traitorous allies, Horus would openly rebel against the Imperium and the will of the Emperor. With the flight of the vessel Eisenstein and its crew, commanded by the rogue Death Guard battle captain Nathaniel Garrow, Rogal Dorn would be drawn into the conflict. Captain Garrow would be rescued by the Imperial Fists in his retreat from the servants of the Dark Gods, and upon the Phalanx, inform Rogal Dorn of the War Master's betrayal. Refusing to believe that his cherished brother would betray the Imperium, Dorn's anger would be unleashed upon Garrow, nearly costing him his life. Yet with the intervention of the Remembrancer, Mercedes Olaton, evidence of the War Master's slaughter of his detachment of civilians and loyal servants would prove Garrow's assertions to be true. Calming from his outburst, Dorn would make haste for Holy Terra and dispatch a Retribution fleet to confront the temporarily weakened traitor forces. With a third of his legion traversing to the Istvan system, Dorn would bring word to the Emperor upon the Throne World of the impending civil war. Upon the arrival of the Imperial Fists of the Sol System, they would find Mars erupting in open rebellion as a schism of the Mechanicum waged. With orders from Malcador the Sigillite, the Imperial Fist would attempt to quell the insurrection. The galaxy burned as the traitors to the throne ambushed the Imperial Fist Retribution fleet, and several proxy wars erupted across the galaxy. Horus had begun his crusade to destroy the Imperium, and the inevitable path he would carve would lead straight to the Throne World. Dorn's remaining legion would be tasked with fortifying the Imperial Palace and orbital defenses of Terra. Walls would be erected, artistic statues of marble and venerated memorials inscribed with gold torn down. Replaced with gun batteries and brutish bunkers, the former glory of the Imperium's splendor would be supplanted with dull rockcrete to bear the force of the future war for humanity. The inner wall would be commanded by the Emperor as he led his custodians and Sisters of Silence in their defense of the demonic invasions from the beings of the Warp. The outer wall would be led by Dorn and his Imperial Fists, and should either fall, humanity would be forfeit. The Sol System would be organized into defensive armadas set to slow the advance of the traitor invasion. Appointed as the Lord Castellan of the Imperium, Rogal Dorn would await the inevitable siege of Terra. His most trusted captains would command each sphere of orbital defense, and when each layer fell, the survivors would retreat to the surface of Terra. Sol had become a fortress, the likes to which had never been seen, yet it would only slow the traitors in their inexorable onslaught towards the Golden Throne. The Alpha Legion would infiltrate the Sol system in their attempt to break the defensive lines of the Imperial Fists. Activating sleeper cells throughout Sol, the Hydra would begin their task of weakening the fortifications of the 7th Legion for the impending assault of the War Master. Challenging Primarch Rogel Dawn to decide the fate of the Solar War, the Primarch of the 20th Legion, Alpharius, would battle the Praetorian of Terra in single combat. The Pale Spear would clash against Dawn's chainsword, Storm's Teeth, as their most trusted Genesons fought and died by their side. Dawn would be victorious, and in slaying the head of the Hydra, purged the remaining Alpha Legion operatives within the Sol system. Yet despite the Imperial Fist's valiant defense, the traitors to the throne would not be stalled. With the aid of the White Scars, Blood Angels, Knights Errant, and Custodians, the Imperial Fists would brace for the assault of the Imperial Palace. Disparate bands of warriors of every stripe and creed would rally to face the War Master's forces as they hurled themselves against the walls of the palace. Countless loyalists and traitors would perish as 1,000 battles ravaged the earth. Yet the War Master's attempts to destroy the Imperial Palace would fail. Reinforcements of the Ultramarines, Space Wolves, and Dark Angels were imminent in their proximity to the Sol system, and time had run out for the traitors' siege. Rogel Dawn, Sanguinius, and the Master of Mankind would board the Sons of Horus flagship, the Vengeful Spirit, and confront the War Master. Yet Dawn would be teleported far from the duel against Horus Lupercal, and after fighting through the bowels of the War Master's flagship, find his brother slain and father gravely wounded. Humanity had been preserved with the Imperial Fists serving as the backbone of the defense of the Imperium. Though the cost had been devastating, the 7th Legion had proven to be a stalwart paragon of the Legiones Astartes. The traitors would be repelled from Holy Terra, to which the Loyalist legions would give chase. Fueled by vengeance for the wounding of the Emperor, Rogel Dawn would carve a bloody path through swathes of the fleeing forces of the deceased War Master. Yet his most hated rival, Perturabo, would not be satisfied with the destruction wrought against the Imperial Fists and lure Rogel Dawn into a deadly trap. The Iron Cage would be constructed upon the planet of Sebastus IV and prove to be an indelible mark of heresy in the eyes of the Imperial Fists. Leading the entirety of his legion into the Eternal Fortress, the might of the Praetorians of Terra would be blunted. Expending ammunition until their reserves depleted, and shattering their combat blades and swords against the armor of their foes, the Imperial Fists would show no quarter to their hated foes. The Iron Warriors would pay their lives dearly for every Son of Dawn slain, and if not for the intervention of the Ultramarines, led by Roboute Guilliman, the survival of the 7th would be called into question. Driving the Iron Warriors from the conflict, the Imperial Fists would be cleansed of their shame. In the wake of the Civil War to decide the fate of humanity, the Legiones Astartes would be disbanded. Roboute Guilliman would draft the Codex Astartes and outline each remaining Loyalist Legion to be broken down into smaller, Codex-compliant chapters. The Imperial Fist would be transformed and distribute its remaining members into the Crimson Fists, Excoriators, Iron Knights, Fists Exemplars, and Black Templars chapters. As the successors of the 7th persecuted the fleeing traitors during their transit to the relative safety of the Eye of Terror, Rogel Dawn would demand reprisal against the traitors for 2 decades. The Imperial Fist would replenish their numbers as their successors gained glory throughout the galaxy. Rogel Dawn would seemingly perish during 781.M31, during Abaddon the Despoiler's first Black Crusade, though no evidence for his death would be recovered, save for his severed right hand from the bridge of the vessel, Sword of Sacrilege. Interred as a relic of the chapter, the skeletal hand of Rogel Dawn serves as a reminder of their Primarch's sacrifices made to humanity. For in the 41st millennium, the Imperial Fists retain a record of great virtue, no matter their losses or countless martyrs made in the name of the defense of the Imperium. Regarded as the single most venerated and respected legion, second only to the Ultramarines, the Imperial Fists are a reminder of the Imperium's gloried past. The heraldry of the gold and yellow of their former legion emblazoned proudly upon their armor. Each company is denoted by the trim of their pauldrons. The heraldry of the clenched fist stands proudly on their left pauldron, while their squad identifier is stamped with high Gothic numerals on the right pauldron, superimposed by their tactical role. Sergeants of the chapter wear red helmets centered with a white skull on its brow. Veterans wear white helmets, whilst veteran sergeants retain the accustomed red helmets with a white stripe. Lieutenants wear yellow helmets with a red and white stripe akin to the conventions of the Ultramarines chapter, with their right pauldron heralded with a starburst icon. Captains wear a simple yellow helmet stamped with a white skull and are honoured with elaborate winged skull icons on their right pauldron. As an intensely compliant chapter of the Codex Astartes, the conventions of rank identifiers outlined by the tome bear unity to several cousin chapters. Tech Marines of the Imperial Fists adorn their armor with the red of the Tech Adepts of Mars, whilst librarians paint their armor blue, and chaplains honor the Reclusium by coating their armor in black. Several specialists comprise the Imperial Fists, each with their own doctrines of battle. The Templar Brethren served as the elite of the Legion during its service of the Great Crusade and Horus Heresy. Guardians of the Temple of Oaths aboard the Phalanx, the warriors of the Templars epitomized unending zeal and martial skill. Bearing ancient Archaeotech armor and weapons, these close combat specialists would lead the most deadly engagements against the enemies of the Legion and subsequent chapter. The Phalanx Warder Squads contain the former Legion's Breacher Siege Squads. Armed with boarding shields, the Phalanx Wardens would be stationed primarily aboard the Imperial Fist flagship to blunt any incursion made against the mobile Fortress Monastery. Duty would be their only reward, as these Guardians of the Phalanx would bear little heraldry and seek glory only in the defense of their bastion. The Huskars would be reinstated by Roboute Guilliman during the Era Indomitus to reflect the past glories of the position during the Horus Heresy. Once the honor guard of Rogel Dawn, the Huskars would now be tasked with defending Imperial forces upon worlds of critical importance to the Imperium. Knowledgeable in governance and masters of planetary defense, the Huskars rally Astra Militarum regiments in their defense of humanity's strongholds, akin to their glorious defense of the Solar War. Veterans of the Siege of Terra would be given wall names to reflect their deeds, with examples being Slaughter, Cold Eye, Killshot, and Severance. With Rogel Dawn earning the title Defiance in honor of his protection of the Imperial Palace. With such titles as Seneschal, Castellan, and Centurion now retired from the chapter's service, the chapter master bears the sole responsibility of leading the Imperial Fists into the Era Indomitus. The era of the Great Crusade would mark the 7th Legion as among the mightiest, if not largest, of the legions, at approximately 100,000 Space Marines strong. Maintaining the largest fleet within the Legiones Astartes, the Imperial Fist would, prior to their conflict against the War Master of Chaos, amass over 1,500 void ships within their armada. Led by their gargantuan flagship, the Phalanx, not even the numerical superiority of the Ultramarines, nor Sons of Horus, could match the Imperial Fist's naval might. Sparingly changed from the origins of the Legion's organizational structure from its formation of the Unification Wars, with time, the traditions of the 7th Legion would nonetheless erode. Squads would comprise of large amounts of assault units and special weapons experts, armed with missile launchers, las cannons, and multi-melters to enable the destruction of armored vehicles and fortifications. Heavily favoring tactical dreadnought armor, including its Indomitus pattern variant, the Imperial Fist's reliance on heavy armor would further bolster their proclivity for fortification. Compiling as many as several hundred squads into each company, the amount of Astartes deployable by the 7th Legion would vary as the heresy induced untold casualties. Companies once grouped together would form battalions, with pairs of such battalions changing names from regiments to crusades and households. Led by their first company, the Templars, this band of 1,000 Astartes would encompass the greatest strength of the Legion brought to bear. Swearing oaths of loyalty to the Emperor and their Primarch within the Temple of Oaths, within their voidship, the Phalanx, these exemplars of the Legion would not only be great warriors, but also paragons of the Creed of the Seventh. However, with the sundering of the Legiones Astartes and losses incurred from the disastrous battle of the Iron Cage, the 7th Legion's might would greatly diminish. As a Codex-compliant chapter of the 41st millennium, the Imperial Fist chapter has verged on the brink of extinction, only to be reborn from the ashes of its former glory. Fervent in their compliance to the tome of the Ultramarines Primarch, the chapter combines its available battle groups and warriors to form balanced companies comprised of 100 Astartes. Upholding their former legion's traditions of siege warfare and urban skirmishes, the Imperial Fist deployed 5 battle companies and 5 reserve companies to mete out the Emperor's justice. The first company, the Emperor's Shield, comprises the elite veterans of the chapter. Commanded by First Captain Darneth Lysander, the Terminator-clad veteran company, also known as the Fists of Dawn. Under the command of their leader, forge a path through the greatest foes of the 7th. The first sergeant of the company guards the vaunted relics of the chapter, with all veteran sergeants abandoning their names and adopting battle honors, won within their dueling arenas. The second company, the Scions of Redemption, bear the shame of their chapter's near annihilation during the War of the Beast. Fighting the enemies of the chapter in order to absolve their collective guilt, service within the second company is not, however, to be considered a dishonor among the chapter. For the Scions of Redemption are ennobled with their cause to diminish the past sins of their chapter and stride into battle alike to a deadly mechanism of war. The third company, the Sentinels of Terror, are renowned for their bravery and stubborn refusal to retreat from battle. Almost annihilated during the closing of the 41st millennium, the Third Company are, despite their chapter's rigid battle doctrine, adaptable combatants. Replacing their continual losses with members of the reserve companies, recruits to the Sentinels of Terror spar with the company's sergeants in honor duels to prove their resolve. The Fourth Company, the Victors of Brax, employ siegebreakers and overwhelming firepower to bring their enemies to heel. Once known as the Reductors, under the command of the legendary 7th Legion Astartes, Fafnir Ran, the company would change their title after their victory against the Alpha Legion during the Battle of Brax. The Fifth Company, the Heralds of Truth, preserve the chapter scriptum Ascender, a tome penned by Primarch Rogul Dorn, detailing his blunt observations and strategies of the Horus Heresy. Members of the Librarius and Reclusium aid the Fifth Company in their guardianship of the sacred texts, despite their gradual decay with the passage of the millennia. Bearing banners and relics from the Legion's former glory, the Heralds of Truth pass down the deeds and history of their chapter. The Sixth Reserve Company, the Siegehammers, are experts of siege warfare. Personally founded from the veterans of the Battle of the Iron Cage by Rogul Dorn, the Sixth Company aid their brothers with heavy firepower should the need arise in battle. The Seventh Reserve Company, the Guardians of the Phalanx, are charged with the maintenance and protection of the Imperial Fist battle station, the Phalanx. The captain of the Seventh Company ritually removes their primary heart to be interred within a device crafted from the Phalanx. Causing heavy pressure to be felt upon the captain's chest at all times, the ritual reminds the captain of the Seventh Company of his duty to preserve the spiritual heart and bastion of the chapter. Deploying land speeders, land raiders, and other armored vehicles in battle, the Seventh Company, alike to the Siegehammers, employ more flexible battle tactics than their battle company brethren. The Eighth Reserve Company, Dorn's Huskarls, bear the legacy of the Legion's reformation in the aftermath of the War of the Beast. Formed by the former Black Templar, Hellbrand Elderic, the 8th Company would from their inception be characterized by furious close combat assaults. Alderic would be demoted from the rank of captain by the chapter master of the Imperial Fists, Maximus Fane, and the 8th Company, comprised heavily with former Black Templars, would be redistributed among the companies of the Imperial Fists to temper their aggression. Serving as stoic and venerated exemplars of the Imperial Fists, Fane would recognize their unfettered rage in battle to have tempered their souls, and with new insight, restore Alderic and his company to the 8th. A proving ground for graduates drawn from the 10th Company, the 8th Company allows their wild nature to be vented to mold new battle brothers of the chapter into indomitable warriors. The 9th Reserve Company, the Wardens, train its members in the arts of siege breaking. Unofficially recognized as a battle company in its own right, the Wardens specialize in maneuvering to advantageous vantage points, installing defensive static positions, and armored assaults. Patience among the company's greatest virtues, the Wardens are renowned for their discipline and regular usage of the chapter's infamous Pain Glove. And finally, the 10th Reserve Company, the Eyes of Dawn, act as the scouts of the Imperial Fists. To bolster battlefield intelligence for their brother companies, the Eyes of Dawn must ascend to the rank of full battle brothers through deeds in order to earn the right to carry heavy armaments into battle. Recruitment into the Imperial Fist chapter proves to be a challenge. As a fleet-based chapter, the Gene Sons of Dawn nonetheless have advantages over their peers. Their storied defense of Holy Terror provides ample opportunities for recruits to be drawn from the Throne World. Supplemental initiates are gathered from numerous other worlds, with the most prominent outside the Sol system being Necromunda. Maintaining several fortress chapels across Imperial space, these outposts fall under the jurisdiction of veterans of the chapter, often grievously wounded and unfit to serve within future campaigns. Holding no claim to the worlds they inhabit, the veterans of the chapter utilize several means of testing and recruiting neophytes. Enticing recruits by holding tournaments on stable worlds, those unfortunate enough to reside within crime-ridden hives often witness the criminal elements of the world's slaughter at the hands of the 7th, and renounce their life of crime if showing promise in the eyes of the veterans. For the Imperial Fists do not discriminate neophytes for the manner of their birth, only the potential and future glories they may bring in service to the chapter. Remolding each aspirant into stoic warriors characterized by the virtues inherited from the heritage of the 7th, each neophyte seeks to embody the example of Rogel Dawn's quintessence. Appraised in their selection process for their reflexes, muscular suitability to implantation, pain tolerance, and dexterity, the Imperial Fists are meticulous in their selection of prospective Astartes. Proven aspirants will study within the Phalanx for 6 Terran Standard months and be taught to speak Low Gothic, venerate the histories of the chapter, and understand the burden required to carry of each battle brother of the chapter. Initiation is conducted with the so-called Tunnel of Terror, where aspirants undergo environmental conditions such as extreme heat, bitter cold, and the embrace of the void. Should the aspirants survive the tunnel, they shall be branded with the mark of the Imperial Fists and begin the psycho-indoctrination, training, and surgeries to become an Astartes. Those who survive these trials are ordered to consume poisonous plant life and venomous creatures as a symbol of their duty to endure corruption and master pain. Informing the aspirant's family of their success in the trials, should they have any kin, it is an honor for any subject of the Imperium to rejoice at their son's ascension as a Space Marine. For they shall bring valor to the chapter in the name of the God Emperor of mankind. The gene seed of the Imperial Fists is incredibly stable in comparison to its counterparts from other legions. Showing no signs of mutation, the gene stock of the Imperial Fists has regardless shown signs of degeneration with time. Astartes of the 7th are unable to utilize the acidic-inducing Belcher's gland, nor the Susan membrane, which allows the Astartes to lay in a state of prolonged hibernation. Space Marines of the Imperial Fists indulge in scrimshoring the bones of the dead during their free time and conduct this peculiar quirk with somber care. Etching markings into the bones of the fallen, this chapter-wide practice focuses the Space Marines' minds, despite the origins of such a practice being lost to history. Wearing their grim ornamentations into battle, this practice occupies each waking hour that an Astartes partakes when not in or preparing for battle. Engraving the bones of their kin with devotional scripts and the deeds of their cherished fallen, the Imperial Fists carry these tokens into battle with pride. The toll incurred from the chapter's endless campaigns weighs heavily upon the hearts of the chapter, with several succumbing to varying stages of their Primarch's gene flaw. Burdened with duties beyond any of his brothers, Rogal Dorn's ceaseless devotion to preserve the Imperium under the constant strain of its assault would be inherited by his sons. Believing themselves to be defective in their pursuit to overcome overwhelming odds, the first stage of the curse of the Seventh is to suffer, not failure. Brooding on the mistakes of past battles, such Astartes shall seek to root out his own weaknesses, and should he be heedless to beware hubris, forever fall short of the deeds of his gene-sire. Finally, he shall come to understand that none are flawless, and pore over the deeds of every one of his battle brothers, and withdraw as an obsessive, confrontational, and uncompromising soul. Often resorting to flagellation within the chapter's pain gloves for the smallest of infractions, the chapter's example of self-sacrifice runs deep within their blood. Yet another flaw is sown within the soul of the Imperial Fists, known as Dorn's Darkness. Inflicted upon every successor of the Imperial Fist Legion, the affliction begins with a blank gaze, a tremor of the limb, or slackness in the jaw. Drowning in the guilt of the wounding of the Emperor experienced by Rogal Dorn, the imprint of the Emperor's fall suffocates those afflicted with unending misery and paralytic fear. Unable to communicate, eat, or feel emotions beyond their torment, such a flaw is an ignominious fate for any Son of Dorn. The Imperial Fist's proclivity for mechanized warfare and fortification embodies the chapter's fascination with organization, discipline, and doctrine. Fastidious in their implementation of battle strategies and cooperation with allied forces, the Imperial Fists have been a boon for the Death Watch since its inception by the chapter and influence in the Order's organization. A hardy chapter characterized by traditions, honor duels, and rites of passage, the Imperial Fists enshrine their reputation as gallant warriors of the Imperium. Revering the last remnant of their former fortress monastery lost during the Siege of Terra upon the Throne World, the Pillar of Bone is surrounded by the chapter's most holy relics. Alongside the Column of Glory, a crystalline pillar in the shadow of the Emperor's golden throne room, fragments of fallen Imperial Fists who fell in defense of the Imperial Palace embed the structure. Serving as reminders to each Astartes of the Seventh of their glory in defending the Emperor's Palace, the interred bones of their ancestors and monuments of their service imbue their chapter with pride. A testament to their great sacrifice to humanity, the Imperial Fists embody their Genefather's courage and defiance to surrender to the ruinous powers. Driven to serve as the embodiments of their Primarch's indomitable strength, the Imperial Fists refuse to withdraw from battle when lesser men would retreat. Relentless in their persecution of the wicked souls who would dare to stand against the Imperium, the descendants of the Throne World's vigilant guardians shall never break under the weight of their eternal burden. Paragons of duty, order, and sacrifice, the Imperial Fists stand ready for the return of their Primarch and the last war to destroy the enemies of humanity. For the Seventh has stood at the breaking point of every war to vanquish the Imperium, and so long as their vigil remains, no foe of the Emperor shall prevail.
The time for speeches is done, said Dorn. The first great test is here. My order to you all is simple, yet heed it well, and exert yourselves to see it done. They are coming. Kill them all.
Smite now the scions of the witch. Grant us the strength to pierce their unclean flesh, to cover the fields with the pale forms of their blasphemous dead, to drown the thunder of guns with the shrieks of their dying, to lay waste their citadels with hurricanes of fire, to wring the hearts of their kin with unavailing grief, to send them into the wastes of their desolated lands in rags and hunger, broken in spirit, worn with travail and begging for the refuge of the grave. We ask it in the spirit of wrath, O Master of mankind.
It is rare for any successor chapters of the Adeptus Astartes to be regarded with the same prestige as the original first founding, for those chapters are the progenitors for all glories to come, laying the foundations for both honor and treachery in kind on both sides of the divide between loyalist and traitor. Yet rarely, a chapter of the Adeptus Astartes grows to be revered to such a degree that none can deny their merit. Their fury in battle, deeds in victory, and means of waging war, a testament for all Astartes to regard. Chapters such as the second founding successors of the Imperial Fists, the Black Templars. Founded in the wake of the scouring of the traitors to the Imperium and internment of the Emperor of Mankind under the Golden Throne, the Black Templars would be birthed in an age of turmoil. Tasked with salvaging a scattered empire, two of the Primarchs of the Imperium would build the foundations of humanity's future. Primarch Roboute Guilliman of the Ultramarines would draft the Codex Astartes, a tome to ensure that the armies of the Adeptus Astartes would never again grow to a size capable of threatening the Imperium under the influence of a single banner. Whereas Primarch of the Imperial Fists, Rogal Dorn, would see to the slow, laborious task of ensuring the survival of Holy Terror and the subjects of the Imperium. Each Primarch given equal support from the remaining loyalist sons of the Emperor. Leman Russ and Vulcan would stand with Dorn, whilst Jaghatai Khan and Corvus Corax would side with Guilliman. Yet Dorn's legion would force his hand with the actions of the 7th Legion strike cruiser, Terrible Angel, engaging the Imperial Navy in battle. Once again threatening to begin a new civil war within the Imperium, Dorn would relent and agree to sunder his legion into smaller chapters, with his champion, Sigismund, leading his new successors as their chapter master. The zealous and defiant veterans of the Imperial Fists now repurposed within the newly established chapter, the Black Templars. Refusing to adhere to Primarch Guilliman's Codex Astartes, Sigismund would embark with his legion far from the throne world to craft his new chapter with his own Primarch's teachings in mind. Fueled with boundless rage and a thirst for vengeance, Sigismund would command his new chapter to hound and harry the demoralized traitors to the Imperium. Eradicating scores of heretics and Xenos throughout the galaxy, Sigismund would vow to never rest in his prosecution to destroy the enemies of the Emperor, enacting an endless crusade known as the Eternal Crusade, which each High Marshal of the chapter must vow to prolong with their appointment. The Eternal Crusade has endured unbroken for 10,000 years, embodying the original vision of the Emperor's Great Crusade, the Black Templars' endeavor to protect, reunite, and unify the scattered remnants of humanity, persecuting the witch, the alien, and the heretic with relentless, unbridled fury in the process. Conducting scores of crusades for millennia, the Black Templars have earned a reputation as the single most xenophobic and religiously pious chapter within the Adeptus Astartes. Uncompromising in their dedication to smite the enemies of humanity, the Black Templars continue to wage war and crusades throughout the stars into the 41st millennium. Preferring to fight their foes in close combat, it is the way of the Templar to feel the warm blood of his enemies drench his tabard and slake his blade, their righteous anger driving them to unparalleled frenzies of slaughter, giving no mercy or reprieve to their enemies, as they orbitally decimate their enemies before conducting drop pod landings and gunship assaults.
vowing oaths of faith and protection to the Emperor. The Astartes of cousin chapters regard the Black Templars as fanatical in their devotion to the Master of Mankind, spending their time when not in battle praying within shrines devoted to the Emperor, Rogel Dawn, and Sigismund. For the Black Templars perceive the Emperor as a god, and those whom deny this truth risk the wrath of the sons of Sigismund. Known within the Black Templars as neophytes, recruits of the chapter are drafted from conquered worlds. As a fleet-based chapter, the Black Templars utilize recruitment worlds to replenish their fallen warriors. Their known recruitment worlds being Barbarossa IV, Cloister, Fergax, Killhaven, Lilia Mundi, Purgasius Free, and Solemnus. Building keeps on every world they conquer or reclaim in the name of the Emperor. Only a handful of recruits are tutored during a Terran standard year. Though within the Imperium, it is a great honor to become a Space Marine of the Black Templars, with some young warriors of planetary defense forces journeying to these worlds to become Space Marines. Known as Expectanton, these young souls will endure dangerous trials and journeys before even attaining the rank of Neophyte. Yet the chapter's zealous hatred of mutants and warp sorcery denies entry to aspirants whom bear any form of genetic impurity or psychic potential. For the Black Templars hold no barracks for a librarius and condemn the use of psychers. Aspirants that pass their varied trials are implanted with the Black Templars' gene seed until their numbers burgeon to 24 neophytes per keep. Once approved by the keep's castellan, apothecaries, and chaplains as fit for service, they will be dispatched to the nearest crusade fleet to undergo the next stage of their induction. More grueling trials await the initiates to weed out the weakest of their number. With no dedicated scout company, alike to contemporary Codex Astartes compliant chapters, a Black Templar Astartes known as an initiate will mentor the most promising candidate. Swearing an oath to train the neophyte, the initiate will prepare the fledgling Templar for his ascension as a battle brother, teaching his pupil the history of the chapter, the rites of worship to the Emperor, and arts of war customary to the Templars. The neophyte pledging obedience to his master, he shall vow to never dishonor him. Acting as servants to their master's whims, neophytes will attend to the initiate during banquets, maintain their weapons, and conduct other day-to-day duties. Observed by the chapter's chaplains, the reclusiasm shall watch for signs of weakness in the neophyte's faith. Fighting alongside their master in battle, the bond between neophyte and his mentor grows strong. Should the mentor die in battle, another battle brother shall shoulder the burden of teaching his pupil. Likewise, should the neophyte die, his mentor shall swear to avenge his death or die in the trying. Once the neophyte has proven his skill in battle, his mentor shall submit him to the chapter's chaplains to undergo the trials of purity. Should he succeed, the neophyte will be elevated to the rank of battle brother during a ceremony of reverence, given the rank of initiate, and honored with the bequeathment of a suit of power armor. As a non-Codex Astartes compliant chapter, the Black Templars employ their own naming conventions, command structures, and ranks. The majority of the chapter consists of initiates, battle brothers whom have passed the trials to become true Astartes. Should the initiate survive their many years of combat, they shall mentor a neophyte under the rank of initiate before ascending to the next stage of the chapter's command structure. Ascending to the ranks of the Sword Brethren Elite First Company, the initiates relinquish their rank and duty to train neophytes of the chapter. Accepting their new role as veterans of the chapter, they shall be trained in the use of Terminator armor. Excelling in the use of melee combat, whilst waging war in the thickest of battles, the Sword Brethren fight alongside their kin under the command of a marshal of the chapter. Should the marshal in command of the Sword Brethren host fall in battle, warriors of the Brethren shall be chosen to duel and ritual single combat, to decide whom shall bear the honor as the new marshal of the Crusade fleet. There also exists a specialist rank amongst the Black Templars akin to a company captain, Castellans. Assigned to lead companies of Black Templars across many campaigns, the Castellans command by example at the forefront of their armies. Castellans that command several companies, often having experience as a member of the Sword Brethren prior to being promoted, often after centuries of esteemed valor in combat, answering only to the marshals of the chapter. The leaders of the many crusade fleets of the Black Templars, the marshals are amongst the greatest warriors of the chapter. Due to their purity to their cause and vast experience, the marshals of the chapter bear the responsibility of ensuring the survival and bloody conquest of thousands of their subordinates. Inspirational examples to the battle brothers of the Black Templars, there is only one figure above such stalwart paragons of the chapter's might: the High Marshal. For all intents and purposes, the chapter master of the Black Templars, there is only a single High Marshal in service at any given time of any crusade. The manifestation of the chapter's will, the High Marshal is not only the greatest tactical and strategic mind of the Black Templars, but also a peerless warrior amongst its ranks. Steeped in the mythology and history of the chapter's vast glories, the High Marshal will ensure the continuation of the Order's eternal crusade against the ruinous powers, but also wage new crusades at his own discretion. As the leader of one of the largest contingents of the Adeptus Astartes, burgeoning past the guidance of the Codex Astartes, it is clear that the High Marshal of the Black Templars commands one of the single largest and most devastating armies within the Imperium. Without the constraints of the High Lords of Terra, the Black Templars are one of the single most autonomous armies within the galaxy, by design allowing them to be untethered by the constraints imposed under other chapters of the Astartes. The Black Templars adhere to the heraldry conventions within their chapter, but allow for individual adornments of devotional imagery, litanies, and purity seals. Honoring the black and white panoply of war, first donned by the Emperor's champion and progenitor of the Black Templars, Sigismund, the chapter's Astartes wear simple black armor, cloaked with white tabards. Though the chapter's tech marines and tank crews change their armor color to the red of Mars, they retain enough of their chapter's heraldry to prevent angering the machine spirits of their war gear. Their chapter livery proudly adorning both their pauldrons, a black Maltese cross on a field of white, trimmed with black for initiates of the chapter, and veterans adopting a red and black design. Neophytes bear pauldrons with no trim, whilst battle brothers change their pauldron trim to denote specialization. Assault squads change their livery trim to red, with chaplains inverting their livery, and apothecaries adding the seal of their order onto the Maltese cross of the assault squad design, often bearing seals on their left greaves to denote the crusade which each Templar belongs to, wrapping chains or bindings to their arms to prevent their weapons from being claimed until the end of battle, the tradition stemming from the fighting pits of the World Eaters, first adopted by Sigismund. Though there also exist chains of zeal, which are permanently welded directly to the Astartes' gauntlets. Those burdened with such a shackling cannot remove their armored gloves, forever compelled to wear arms for their chapter until the end of his days. Though within the Black Templars, there also exists unique heraldry for their most deadly warrior, the Emperor's champion. Following in the steps of their founder, Sigismund, the Emperor's champion embodies the chapter's glorious skill at arms and storied victories. Trimmed in the black, white, and gold armor of faith, and bearing the laurel wreath upon his helmet, the Emperor's champion bears the relic blade, the black sword, first wielded by Sigismund, a glorious beacon of the chapter's valor, etched in ceramite. Each company of the Black Templars is composed primarily of initiate battle brothers. With up to 20 comprising a single company, most companies fight with bolters, blades, and zealous rage. With the tendency of each company to form and dissolve with regularity, most squads are bonded together by camaraderie rather than imposed organizational structure, with most squads roughly adhering to 10 initiates, each mentoring a neophyte. Highly flexible once deployed, some companies will bear weapons such as plasma guns, flamers, and power fists, should specialist war gear be required for the crusade or battle at hand. Fighting alongside their neophytes, the initiates train their bold aspirants in the most dangerous of trials by fire, the battlefield. The weak perish and the strong survive, each new veteran of the chapter bolstering their chapter's already deadly reputation. With the Black Templars bereft of a dedicated scout company, battle-proven neophytes will oftentimes be grouped together into independent squads to act as scouts. Tasked with infiltration and analysis of enemy positions, the neophytes tasked such important missions are driven to excel in order to please their mentors. Due to their dismissal of the Codex Astartes, it is difficult to ascertain the true amount of Black Templar Astartes in service. As many as 14 crusades have been conducted at any one time during the chapter's history, though current projections indicate an average of 3 crusades to be typical for the chapter during the 41st millennium. Rumored to number to more than 6,000 Astartes, the Black Templars are regarded as the largest chapter of Adeptus Astartes within the Imperium. A member of only 3 known chapters to number more Astartes than Codex compliance, their contemporaries being the Space Wolves and Grey Knights. Scrutinized by the Inquisition, the Black Templars seemingly prevent censure by the Imperium due to their flawless record of compliance, purging of Xenos, and duty to the Emperor. With their hatred of warp corruption, the Black Templars refuse to fight alongside any chapter that deploys the use of librarians or psychers, with exception given to the Grey Knights chapter due to their widespread incorruptible nature and genetic heritage of the Emperor. With Black Templars appointed to serve as members of the Death Watch finding their service challenging in fighting alongside librarians of the elite organization of Xenos Hunters. As a fleet-based chapter, the Black Templars' companies are scattered throughout the galaxy, conducting various crusades. Under the command of the Marshals and scrutiny of the High Marshal, each crusade fleet consists of 5 great companies. The first, as is customary, being the Marshal's Household, consisting of the fleet's greatest warriors. The 4 subsequent companies, known as Fighting Companies, are named after their commanding Castellan, often monikered with a unique company name. For example, Castellan Edissus Company during the Akron Crusade would name his company the First Sons. Ever vigilant to bombard and strike their enemies from their vast fleet of warships, the Black Templars also have possession of one of the largest ships within the Imperium, the rare Gloriana-class flagship, the Eternal Crusader. Home of the chapter's reclusiasm, armories, relics, and vaults, the Eternal Crusader acts as the chapter's fortress monastery and epicenter. Inscribing their many deeds and glories within the flagship's Hall of Records, the Black Templars stand ready to combat any threat that the galaxy can muster. As the single largest and most devotional chapter in defense of the Emperor's Imperium, woe betide any foe whom shall face the zealous sons of Dawn. Trust in the Emperor at the hour of battle. Trust to him to intercede and protect his warriors true as they deal death on alien soil. Turn their seas to red with the blood of their slain. Crush their hopes, their dreams, and turn their songs into cries of lamentation.
I have not summoned you for censure, but to speak earnestly. Rogel Dawn thought there was no higher purpose to the existence of the Astartes than the unification of mankind. I see that in you also, and his determination. I, need men who fight bravely, even when faced with great tragedy. I have seen with my own eyes in recent days how you inspire intense loyalty in those around you, and I see you hold duty above glory or vengeance. My brother would be proud. Reassemble your chapter, Pedro Cantor, and look now to the future, rather than the past. The Loki sector, and the Imperium entire, has need of you. The successor chapters of the Adeptus Astartes would forge many deeds across the stars in blood, sweat, and toil. Some would become synonymous with glory, others grim necessity, and a select few would garner a reputation as among the most noble warriors of the Imperium. For today, we shall elucidate a storied chapter known as quite possibly the most valiant of the Angels of Death, the stalwart defenders of the innocent, the Crimson Fists. In the wake of the internment of the Master of Mankind upon the Golden Throne with the conclusion of the Horus Heresy, a new generation of Astartes would be needed to combat the foul terrors of the galaxy. The legions of old had proven disastrous for the well-being of humanity,
and shown that even among the Emperor's angels, none were beyond the enticements of chaos. In order to prevent further catastrophe of another civil war led by demagogues commanding vast Astartes armies, the Primarch of the Ultramarines, Rabute Guilliman, would pen a codex to limit their strength. Known as the Codex Astartes, this revered tome would outline the organization of the Legiones Astartes into smaller, successor chapters. The Sons of Rogel Dawn, the Imperial Fists, would sire a new founding comprised of its remaining strength. Aside from its primogenitor, the remaining 2 chapters would be characterized by the Legion's most prominent traits. The Black Templars would exhibit the zeal of its fury in battle, whilst the Legion's level-headed and collected souls would found the Crimson Fists. The most junior members of the 7th Legion, with exception to its senior commanders, the Crimson Fist would be led by their venerable hero of the heresy, Alexis Pollux, and venture forth into the void to claim new deeds and glories. The so-called Great Father of the chapter had proven his military genius during the Battle of Phal and duties to defend the Pharos device of Sofa, and would prove to be a worthy chapter master. An expert at naval tactics and an immensely imposing figure in stature, Pollux would lead his chapter for 800 years before perishing. Crusading across the stars as a fleet-based chapter, the Sons of Alexis would over time be regarded as among the most competent, loyal, and stalwart defenders of the Imperium. Serving predominantly within the Loki sector of the Segmentum Tempestus, with their aid given to the Emperor's Holy Inquisition and the Adeptus Administratum, the Crimson Fist would quell Xenos outbreaks and destroy corrupted Astartes chapters, such as the Sons of Gideon and the Marines Vigilant. Famed for their crusade of righteous liberation, which would last for 3 centuries and whittle down their number to only 128 Astartes. Building a close bond with the worlds of the Loki sector, the chapter would be granted feudal rights to establish their own chapter planet upon Rin's world. Gifted for their victory of the Voltigern Crusade, their new fiefdom of the Agri-world would, despite its proximity to viable neighboring recruitment worlds and resources, incur a heavy toll for the Crimson Fists. Constructing their new fortress monastery, the Arx Tyrannus, from the remains of their ancient battle barge, Rutulus Tyrannus, within the Hellblade Mountains of Rin's world's southern continent, the Crimson Fist would stave off countless greenskin invasions. Yet during 989.M41, a gigantic Orc war, led by the warlord Snagrod, the arch-arsonist of Caradon, would surround the Loki sector and resolve to conquer Rin's world. Massacring the defenders of the colony of Bad Landing, the citizenry would call for the aid of the chapter, to which its third company would heed their hails. Utterly defeated by the Xenos, the third company would face overwhelming opposition due to inaccurate intel reports, with few Astartes survivors escaping to their chapter world. Recalling every member of the chapter to Rin's world, the Lord Hellblade and Chapter Master of the Crimson Fists, Pedro Cantor, would organize the defense of their homeworld and brace themselves for the onslaught impending from Snagrod. An invasion force of unseen scale, save for the greenskin invasion of the Second War for Armageddon, the Orc War would reach the surface of the planet by using an obscenely suicidal warp maneuver, which no sane human would dare to attempt. Every company of the venerated and proud chapter would face the Xenos and employ orbital defense systems, tiered defensive lines, and their martial skill to combat the Orc menace. One of the planet's defense missiles would suffer a catastrophic failure and destroy the chapter's fortress monastery, causing a chain reaction within the chapter's arsenal of weapons, creating a vast explosion. Hundreds of Astartes, chapter serfs, and civilians would perish, leaving only 16 Astartes within the fortress monastery surviving its destruction. Rin's world's defenses would deactivate, allowing for the Orcs to overwhelm the surface. Reorganizing within the planet's capital of New Rin City, Pedro Cantor would reunite with the remaining Astartes of the chapter, numbering less than 400. 2 choices would be presented to Cantor: marshal his men for a valiant last stand fated to extinguish the chapter's future deeds, or fight a guerrilla war of survival until reinforcements would arrive. Fighting for 18 solar months in small bands of warriors, the Crimson Fist would await the arrival of the Imperial Navy and during 990.M41, the beleaguered Crimson Fists, now fewer in number than months prior, would face the Orc Xenos alongside fresh soldiers of the Astra Militarum, contingents of Cousin Space Marine chapters, and deployments of Titan Legios of the Relief Fleet. Routing the War of Snagrod, the Crimson Fist would look upon their tattered homeworld ravaged by a war of disgusting savagery and bloodshed. The Crimson Fist had lost over half its men, their fortress monastery lay in ruins, their gene stores had been ravaged, and many of the relics of their chapter had been destroyed. Struggling for years to rebuild their chapter world, the Crimson Fist would harbour a deep hatred for the Orc Xenos following their defiant stand upon Rin's world. Deprived of their homeworld's resources, the Crimson Fist now venture far from the reminder of their shame, returning only to mourn their fallen brethren. Following their near defeat, the Crimson Fist would find their circumstance to be a rare one among any serving Astartes chapter. Now overwhelmingly comprised of veterans and specialists, such as tech marines and apothecaries. No longer viable to act as a crusading army of the Adeptus Astartes, the Crimson Fist would be unable to commit its forces to wage war, with so many tasks committing its Astartes to rebuild and repair its waning resources. The chapter's gene seed, now endangered, committing any Astartes to fight in their state, would threaten the extinction of the chapter. Hastening recruitment of new aspirants into the chapter, the Crimson Fist would balance on a knife's edge, as its companies now numbered only handfuls of space marines. Restraining their hunger for reprisal against the Orc Xenos in the surrounding Loki sector, the Crimson Fist would temper their rage as the chapter rebuilt. Championing survival in the stead of personal glory, the legacy of their heroic forebear would provide great solace in their task of resisting their temptation to succumb to despair. Yet with the return of the avenging son of the Emperor, Rabute Gilliman, the Crimson Fist would be delivered from their plight. Rin's world would once more be beset with invaders following the expanse of the Great Rift caused by the destruction of Cadia during Abaddon the Despoiler's 13th Black Crusade. Warp storms would emerge within the Loki sector as demonic incursions would spill forth upon the planet, led by the Demon Prince, Raxor. Facing their foe, despite their still ravaged numbers, the Crimson Fist would not allow the thralls of the ruinous powers to taint their homeworld. The timely intervention of the Primarch of the Ultramarines and his Indomitas crusade would aid the relief of Rin's world, and with the demonic threat quelled, a new breed of warriors would be bequeathed to the long-suffering Astartes. Primaris Space Marines, clad in the heraldry of the Crimson Fists, would be installed within the companies of the chapter. Among the most beleaguered chapters of the Astartes, the Crimson Fist would be among the first to be replenished with their new Primaris reinforcements. Their genetic makeup, more closely composed of their Primarch's own genome than any of their ranks, the purity of their new kin would harken back to the Great Crusade, as they had been kept in stasis for millennia as a contingency by the Master of Mankind. For some among these new warriors would recall personally observing the Primarch of the Imperial Fists, as they had been separated from their kin of the 7th Legion prior to being redeployed in the Imperium's darkest hour. Now bolstered with a new breed of Space Marines, the Crimson Fist would be renewed with the inspiration of the Primarch of the Ultramarines and continue to wage war in the name of the Imperium. Their long suffering not over, the sons of Rogel Dawn would regardless emulate the example of their Primarch and the Avenging Son as saviors of the downtrodden of the Imperium. Dispatching his reinvigorated chapter to aid the most beleaguered of engagements across the stars, the Crimson Fists emancipate the defenders of the innocent in measured yet wrathful deployments. Aiding Imperial forces against demonic and Orc invasions, the chapter maximizes their efficiency with minimal casualties to honor the sacrifices of their slain battle brothers. Their noble sacrifices and deeds resounding throughout the Imperium as true paragons of humanity. As strict adherents of the Codex Astartes, the Crimson Fists view the tome akin to a sacred text. Varying slightly from its outlines with their own customs earned through strife, the Crimson Fist would honor their past glories. Following the chapter's colossal losses of the Crusade of Righteous Liberation, the chapter would number only 128 Space Marines in strength, and honor its first company henceforth by comprising 128 Astartes within its ranks. Following the combat doctrines of the Codex Astartes to the letter, most engagements by the Crimson Fists are broad in their methods of waging war. Countering any opposition with various tactical approaches, the chapter adapts quickly to changes in their enemy's deployment with exacting precision and well-trained reprisal attacks. Crusading for millennia, the chapter utilizes more specialist units than the dictates of the Codex Astartes allows, and boasts an extensive naval armada. The chapter utilizes more specialist units than the dictates of the Codex Astartes allows, and boasts an extensive naval armada, which is the envy of most Astartes chapters. Maintained by the chapter's tech marines, each vessel also harbors an Astartes apothecary, allowing for the preservation and retrieval of gene seed during the most fraught of skirmishes. Their numbers annihilated with the loss of their fortress monastery and the invasion of Rin's world by the Orc Xenos, the chapter would remain under strength, yet rebuilds to this day. Fielding 4 severely reduced companies, many scout cadres trained to one day are sent to the honored battle companies. Yet with the timely intervention of the Avenging Sun, Rabute Gilliman, the chapter has once more been reinforced with new companies of Primaris Space Marines. Slowly replenishing their forces, the Crimson Fist take to the stars once again as a crusading force, with each company led by a hero of the Rin's World campaign. Though with such a large contingent of its forces of its Primaris Marines still unproven in the eyes of the chapter, their efficacy remains scrutinized. Interacting with the populace of Rin's World rarely, the Crimson Fist would be seen as aloof by the people of the Agri-World, yet with their dismantling of their fortress monastery, the Arx Tyrannus from their chapter fleet, and reconstruction within the Hellblade Mountains, their continued presence would be enshrined around the ancient statue of their forebear, Alexis Pollux. Destroyed by the Orc War of Snagrod, it is unclear if the Crimson Fists have rebuilt their fortress monastery with their subsequent recovery efforts of Rin's World. Recruiting their forces from many worlds within the Loki sector, strangely, for a chapter with a base of operations, the chapter do not actively recruit from their homeworld. Preferring to draft recruits from feral worlds such as Blackwater, the Crimson Fist see great potential of the denizens of the world, infamous for its harsh conditions. Ferocious yet noble people, the humans of Blackwater and its contemporaries are intimately familiar with adversity and stoically struggle against the world's harsh environments. Drawing only from warriors proven to exhibit honorable conduct and athleticism, the Crimson Fists only recruit those suited to be followers of their own creed and culture. Transitioning from a fleet-based to world-based chapter, the Crimson Fists, while accepting recruits from Rin's World and its neighboring planets, regardless still prioritize the peoples of Blackwater with their annual traversal to the planet for the Festival of the Bloodied Fist. Ceremonially evaluating their aspirants through trials of mental, martial, and spiritual toil, the Crimson Fists command those successful in their trials to delve deep into the toxic swamps of Blackwater. Tasked with slaying a barb dragon with their bare hands, only the most capable of aspirants shall return with a token to prove their success in slaying such a dangerous beast. Appointed to the 10th Company with their successful surgeries and psycho-indoctrination, each neophyte of the Crimson Fists shall undertake the ritual known as the Steeping. Should they succeed in accepting their newly implanted organs and gene seed, these neophytes shall be known as full Battle Brothers and be appointed to one of the reserve companies. The chapter's gene seed, though incredibly stable, nonetheless bears the flaws inherent among all inheritors of the legacy of Rogel Dawn. Unable to utilize the Betcher's gland, allowing for their saliva to become corrosive, or the Susan membrane to facilitate deep hibernation, the Crimson Fist regardless boast a genetic purity, free of mutations or chaos contamination. Able to recruit at a hastened rate compared to their peers, the Crimson Fist, though under strength, are among the best suited to replenish their ranks. Escaping extinction time and again throughout their history, the Crimson Fist regardless stave off obsolescence. Burdened with the genetic curse of Rogel Dawn, the Crimson Fists, alike to their cousin successors of the 7th, shall not retreat from battle, nor suffer defeat in the name of the Praetorian.
their stubborn refusal to live with the shame of defeat, the Crimson Fists are fortunate to have not succumbed to the same fate suffered by countless annihilated chapters of the 7th. For the descendants of the Great Father would rather die than bring dishonor to their chapter. Among the Crimson Fists, several specialist ranks exist to facilitate duties not prescribed by the Codex Astartes. The Lord Hellblade is the title attributed by the people of Rin's world to the chapter master of the Crimson Fists. Recognized as a member of the Imperium's feudal nobility, the Lord Hellblade leads the elite First Crusade Company in the defense of the chapter homeworld. The Master of the Fleet oversees the Void Command of the Armada, yet does not hold the rank of Astartes captain. Whilst the Monitor, a senior astropath of the chapter serfs, presides over the communicatus of the once Arx Tyrannus. Astartes aspirants unable to accept the chapter's gene seed and implants honor the chapter as labor serfs and are treated with respect by their brethren despite their failings. Regarded as the Chosen, these individuals support their ascended kin during combat as messengers, skilled laborers, and major domos who lead the personnel of the Chosen as their overseer. Acting as the personal attendant and confidant of the chapter master, the major domo is crucial in their deeds of facilitating the administration and coordination of the chapter's menials. With the loss of their fortress monastery, the Crimson Fist would utilize their chapter keep of the Zona Regis of Rin's world, the Cassar, as their new base of operations. Harbored within the Silver Citadel of New Rin City, under the protection of Void Shields, the chapter serfs dispatched to the protection of the chapter's contingent fortress toil to facilitate the needs of the chapter, whilst also rebuilding the Arx Tyrannus. Revering the legacy of the Imperial Fist Legion, the Crimson Fists retain close ties to their primogenitor chapter and its last War Protocol kin. Retaining many of its traditions, such as their proclivity to champion defensive strategies and battle doctrines, unique roles of their forebear, such as the title of Emperor's Champion, remain, but in a much diminished state. Permitting a singular warrior to adopt the panoply of the Emperor's Champion of the chapter on only the rarest of circumstances, only the direst of conflicts require such a revered harbinger of destruction. Gifted visions from the Master of Mankind himself, they shall claim the black sword and armor of faith of the chapter's armory and hunt their preordained foe in battle. Yet such an instance has not been recorded since the destruction of their fortress monastery during the invasion of Rin's world, with some speculating that such artifacts have been lost to the chapter during the conflict. Invited to the Imperial Fist's Feast of Blades alongside their kin of the Black Templars, Celestial Lions, Death Strike, Emperor's Warbringers, Excoriators, Executioners, Firelords, Fists Exemplar, Hammers of Dawn, Iron Knights, Knights of Dawn, Sons of Dawn, Soul Drinkers and White Templars, the Crimson Fists compete in the Centennial competition to strengthen their bonds of kinship. Choosing a company champion within their ranks, each member of the Last War successors battle in a test of arms to earn glory for their chapter. Awarding the victor custodianship of the artifact of the 7th Legion, the Sword of Sebastus, also known as the Dawn's Blade, the winner shall host the next tournament and choose the locale for the next competition a century following. The yearly calendar of the culture of the Crimson Fists also bears many sacred days of devotion which honor, yet do not worship, the Emperor, their Primarch, and their Great Father, Alexis Pollux. The Miracle of the Blood is observed by the chapter every year to mark the date of their chapter's founding. 20 chaplains of the Sacratium perform a ritual utilizing a drop of Rogal Dorn's own blood kept preserved within an ornate scepter. Releasing the dried lump of blood from its confinement to observe its rejuvenation to liquid form, this ritual reminds the chapter that their Genesire's presence still remains among them. The Day of Foundation coincides with the Festival of the Blood and honors the glories of their forebears by holding private ceremonies to study the writings of Alexis Pollux and Rogal Dorn. Recounting tales of their most glorious deeds, the Battle Brothers of the chapter cherish the deeds of their ancestors and seek to apply lessons learned from their legacy to forge their own legends in an introspective and humble manner. The Festival of the Bloodied Fist marks the ascendance of the Scout Marines of the chapter into fully fledged battle brothers. Requiring the aspirants to slay a barb dragon bare-handed upon the death world of Blackwater, their success in the ritual of the steeping is a moment of immense pride for those who succeed in their trial. Submerging their left fist into the blood of the slain barb dragon, this tradition marks their right to bear the crimson-clad ceramite fist of their new power armor suit. The Day of Renewal marks the chapter's replenishment of their gene banks with the reinforcements gifted to the chapter during the Indomitus Crusade. Vowing to renew their chapter to its former glory, the Crimson Fist resolved to repay their debt to the Lord Commander of the Imperium, Rabute Gilliman, for his salvation of their chapter's dire circumstance. The most revered champions of the chapter are gifted immense power fists to use in battle as symbols of their deeds made in the name of their chapter, and shall use such instruments of war to bludgeon their foes into bloody pulps. Claiming the teeth of slain orcs in battle, the Crimson Fists collect such tokens of their kills to be displayed within trophy rooms of the chapter. Adorning their armor in not only teeth, but also talismans made of orc skulls and tatters of orc banners claimed in battle, the Crimson Fists display their victories against their foes with macabre pride. Clad in deep blue armor, trimmed with crimson and white markings, the chapter's armorials are among the most reserved of all chapters of the Adeptus Astartes. Their proud sigil of a crimson fist, clenched across a black field adorning their left pauldron, their proud heraldry symbolizes their heritage as successors of the Imperial Fists, whilst honoring the Great Father, Alexis Pollux. Steeped in the tradition of Rogel Dawn's ritual cutting of his palms and those of his recruits before clasping them to share their unity in blood, the Crimson Fists uphold the bond first forged by their gene-sire. Denoting their rank with unique conventions to the chapter, Scout Marines, while attributed with red gauntlets, trim their handguards with blue to signify their lack of attaining their namesake. Every battle brother of the senior companies paints their left gauntlet alike to their chapter icon, while each veteran of the Crimson Fists also coat their right gauntlet with blood red to signify their membership of the Elite Crusade Company. Stern Guard veterans of the First Company paint their helmets white, whilst lieutenants mark their helmets with a red stripe centered on their helmet. Otherwise conservative in their heraldic markings, the Crimson Fists adhere to the Codex Astartes in their methods of identifying their battlefield roles and squad identifiers. Their right pauldron bears their role as battle line, close support, fire support, veteran, or command, each centered upon a crimson roundel. White High Gothic numerals are stenciled on the center of their battlefield role to indicate their squad number, yet the chapter does not signify their company numbers with numerals. Trimming their armor pauldrons with varying colors to denote their companies, each company captain also garners a unique title and are responsible for unique roles within the chapter. The 1st Battle Company mark their pauldrons with white and are led by their current Master of Crusades, Ishmael Acario. Known as the Crusade Company, the elite vanguard of the chapter charges into battle at full strength of 128 Astartes in only the most fraught of battles. The 2nd Battle Company, the Shield Wall, mark their trim with gold and are led by the Master of the Shield, Stefan Hyost. The Bulwark against the Darkness, the 2nd Battle Company specialize in defensive maneuvers, akin to the legacy of the Imperial Fists. The 3rd Battle Company, the Red Lightning, trim their pauldrons red and are led by the Master of the Line, Faradis Anto. Experts of hit-and-run tactics, the 3rd Company target vulnerable weak points in enemy defenses to allow their allies to further exploit the opponent's battle lines. The 4th Battle Company, the Crimson Lancers, are led by Master of the Charge, Isidore Helios, and mark their trim with green. Known to be brash warriors among their kin, the Crimson Lancers are headstrong warriors, regarded as among the mightiest fighters within the chapter. The 5th Battle Company, the War Riders, trim their pauldrons black and are led by the Master of Steeds, Razel Solano. Charging into battle atop jet bikes and other armored vehicles, the 5th Company are the hammer blow of their chapter and overwhelm their opponents with the treads of war. The 6th Reserve Company, the Iron Guardians, are led by the Master of the Watch, Alejandro Solari, and trim their pauldrons bronze. Analyzing threats to Rin's world and its fleet contingent, The warriors of the 6th Company are astute tacticians focused on defensive maneuvers to preserve their long-suffering chapter. The 7th Reserve Company, the Wardens of Rin, trim their pauldrons purple and are led by the Master of the Gates, Castian Alzonas. The stalwart guardians of Rin's world see to the planetary defenses of their homeworld and coordinate their company with the planetary defense forces. The 8th Reserve Company, the Red Path, are led by the Master of Blades, Gerard Garasso, and trim their pauldrons grey. Experts at close quarters combat, is proficient with melee combat, and are among the greatest duelists of the chapter. The 9th Reserve Company, the Fists of Rin, trim their pauldrons with blue, and are led by the Master of the Siege, Raphael Acastus. Masters of protracted warfare, the 9th Company are relentless in their harrying of dug-in adversaries and fortifications. And finally, the 10th Scout Company, the Wayfinders, are led by the Master of Shadows, Caldemus Ortiz. The lifeblood of future heroes of the chapter, the Scout Marines of the 10th Company obey the commands and guidance of their superiors before proving their worth as warriors, capable of fighting among the many reserve companies. Following in the footsteps of their founder, Alexis Pollux, the Crimson Fists honor the legacy of their legendary Imperial Fist captain with their characteristic level-headed demeanor and effective tactical acumen. Consistently championing the outlined battle stratagems of the Codex Astartes, combined with their adoption of blue ceramite, many detractors of the chapter, including those of their own kin, regard their character more alike to an Ultramarine successor than the vaunted Imperial Fists. Their reverence to the 7th Legion, fervently upheld despite such scrutiny, the Crimson Fists are immensely adaptable to the ever-changing battlefields they are thrust into. Constantly harassed by Orc warbands within the Loki sector, the chapter never wants for targets to hone their skill in combating the Greenskin Tide. Serving with distinction among the ranks of the Death Watch, despite the misfortune of their chapter, the Crimson Fists do not shirk their tithes to the elite Xenos hunters of the Imperium. With some records pointing to Crimson Fists comprising as many as a quarter of several Death Watch kill teams, their preferential treatment by the Ordo Xenos of the Inquisition is well earned. Already renowned as experts at killing their hated foe, the Orc Xenos, every Crimson Fist among the ranks of the Death Watch is a valuable asset to the Chamber Militant of the Ordo Xenos. Considered entitled to unfair privileges by their peers within each kill team, the seconded Crimson Fists nevertheless garner immense favor from the Inquisition for their expertise in dispatching greenskin threats. Reputed to have tithed more Astartes than any other chapter to the Death Watch, the Crimson Fists care not for the envy of their peers, nor slights made against them. Petitioned for aid by the Adeptus Administratum and Inquisition on numerous occasions, due to their pedigree as Orc killers, the Crimson Fist heritage of the 7th Legion makes them extremely capable as both an aggressive or defensive force against the Orc Xenos. Adept at slaying other Xenos races, such as the Eldar during the chapter's first recorded engagement in defense of the colony of Uralek Prime, their 9,000-year crusade to cleanse the galaxy of Xenos has made them synonymous with combating such alien threats. Due to their severe losses following the invasion of Rin's world, the chapter focuses primarily on surgical strikes to prevent further casualties to their already beleaguered and understaffed chapter. Yet should the Crimson Fists return to full strength, they shall be the bane of untold Xenos across the stars. When a man dies before his time, how much is truly lost? More than just a life, certainly. A branch withers and bears no more fruit. Futures are erased, paths closed that can never be reopened. Would his offspring have been saints? Killers? Both? When a man dies before his time, the answers go with him. This begs the question, should not all men be saved?
The Excoriators are a second founding successor chapter of the Imperial Fists. Assigned as among the 20 members of the Astartes Praesus, tasked with guarding the Eye of Terror, the chapter earned much favor for their founding members' defense of the Imperial Palace during the siege of the Throne World.
Ever vigilant in their patrols surrounding the Eye of Terror, the excoriators have endured much suffering during their vigil. Revered for their involvement during the War of the Beast, defense of Sirtis Minor, and Abaddon the Despoiler's 13th Black Crusade, this Codex-compliant chapter is resolute in facing the pawns of the ruinous powers. Granting unique honorifics to their Astartes, captains are known as Corpus Captains, champions as Chapter Scourge, first chaplains as Santiarchs, and sergeants as Whips. Masters of well-timed and fluid maneuvers, the chapter seeks to diminish their foes through attrition, whilst minimizing their own casualties. Caring not for superficial trappings nor aesthetic blemishes, the chapter is pragmatic in their maintenance of arms and armor. Ritually scarring their flesh in order to absolve their past sins through pain, their rites of castigation and donning of Dawn's mantle are a means to attain spiritual communion with their Primarch, Rogul Dawn. Settling grievances through trials by the blade, no matter the rank of an Astartes, every one of their kindred may challenge any of their peers to resolve their disputes, but shall not be concluded until drawing first blood from their opponent's face. Observed by their chaplains to maintain order through their contest, they shall record the outcome and inscribe them within their chapter's records. Reverent of each pockmark and dent upon their armor, these stoic warriors cherish every scar and mark incurred from battle. Clad in white ceramite, paired with silver trim and chest aquillas, each Astartes designates their tactical role with dark red paint on their right pauldron. The symbol of their chapter, a scarlet gauntlet clutching 2 yellow lightning bolts in a closed fist atop a field of ivory, emulates their primogenitor's iconography and is derived from their lost ancient stigmata battle standard. Championing survival over costly advances or glorious last stands, their methods have proven effective in retaining their chapter's legacy.
You may cleave to your courage, but that will fail you. Look to your weapons, but you will find them not enough. Run, fight, hide, pray, cry out or cower, it does not matter, for we are come. The Executioners are a third founding successor chapter of the Imperial Fists. Proud scions of the 7th Legion, their patriarch Fafnir Ran would symbolize the vaunted legacy of valor, ruthlessness and honor of the captain's deeds. The headhunters of the Imperium, many of their peers looked to the chapter as little more than barbaric, ill-disciplined brutes. Yet beneath their gore-spattered exterior, the Executioners harbor a concealed cunning and exploit their detractors' disdain for their demeanor. Among the most unwavering servants of the Imperium during its darkest days, the glory of the Executioners speaks for itself and befits their stoic duty to protect the wider Imperium from threats among the Segmentum Pacificus. Based within the desolate void wastes of the galactic southwest, the Executioners have, regardless of their station, voyaged far and wide across the galaxy to mete out the Emperor's wrath. Claiming the planets of Stygia and Aquilon as their chapter worlds, the chapter monastery of Darkenvault rests within the armored asteroid base between the two worlds, revolving around the system's slowly dying star. Fighting alongside the Raven Guard, Space Wolves and Angels of Absolution chapters during the invasion of Nova Sulis during 392.M36, for their vaunted service to the Imperium, the Executioners would be honored with siring their own successor chapter with the completion of the campaign, the Iron Champions. As their renown continued to climb, for millennia to follow, their fortress monastery of Darkenvault would be invaded by waves of orcs, xenos, tyranids and demonic incursions, requiring the chapter in its entirety to rally to the defense of their homeworld. Already battle-scarred for their purge of an outbreak of enslavers at the borders of Imperial space, the Executioners would be eroded to 300 battle brothers in number. Invaded by a worm-like xenos species of unknown origin, the Executioners would send a distress signal to any nearby chapters to aid in their defense of their fortress monastery. Receiving the transmission, the Astral Claws chapter of Space Marines, aided by Battlefleet Tempestus, would add their might to the Executioners
as they began their final stand. Saving the chapter from extinction, the Astral Claws would receive a blood debt from the executioners to be redeemed whenever it would be needed of their saviors, stating that they would pledge their blades should ever the Astral Claws be threatened. Replenishing their numbers over the centuries to follow, their honor would regardless be besmirched during the conflict of the Badab War. Siding with the secessionists of the Astral Claws, led by Luft Huron, by virtue of their blood debt, the executioners would serve for many years at the side of the tyrant of Badab. Defecting to the loyalist cause of the war as the veracity of their cause became false, with the conclusion of the Badab War, the chapter would be sentenced to a 100-year penitent crusade for their actions. Denied the right to replenish their losses with aspirants during their penitent crusade, the Salamanders would safeguard their chapter homeworlds in their absence. Their cultist purges made in the name of the Steel Unbound campaign of the Telemon Cloud would greatly aid their redemption in the eyes of the High Lords of Terror, leading to their war against the Pocket Empire of Chaos within the Galactic Core. Besting 3 Chaos warbands and a traitor Titan Legion during their conflict, the chapter would earn vast glories for their actions, despite their circumstance. Destroying the secessionist enclave in the name of the Imperium, the executioners would lose several members of their First Company veterans, yet claim an immense voidcraft, Achilles, as spoils of their campaign. Renaming the vessel Sire of Mefusa, the executioners would in their last recorded campaign of their penitent crusade venture to the Orpheus sector. Finding the Necron Xenos to have decimated countless warriors of the Imperium prior to their arrival, the executioners would vow to accomplish their so-called Death Quest upon the war zones of the Orpheus sector. The chapter remains there to this day, serving out the final years of their penitent crusade, whether death or absolution shall be their reward. Strict adherence to the Codex Astartes, the executioners, despite their appearance, are a highly disciplined organization. Their proclivity for close-quarters combat, one of the few deviations from their tome's outlines, such shows of martial skill in the presence of their kin, allows for the battle brothers of the chapter to prove their skill at arms. Ending disputes between battle brothers only through maiming and death, the honor of the chapter is beyond such reproach that each battle brother shall not tolerate attacks on their character lightly. Worshipping the Emperor as a god, though a pious chapter, the Sons of Fafnir Ran do not acknowledge the ecclesiarchy and its beliefs as more than a useful superstition to keep the subjects of the Imperium in line. Accruing slaughter tallies during each battle, holy feasts and memorial ceremonies are made within Darkenvolt's catacombs to honor the rampages of fallen battle brothers, for the highest virtue of an executioner is the amount of enemies killed in the name of the Master of Mankind. Replacing the standard Codex-compliant Devastator squad with Sternguard veterans, the chapter's bias towards attritional warfare littered with carnage belie their inheritance of their founder's temperament. Utilizing land speeders and heavy armor when possible, the chapter despises the use of assault bikes and hit-and-run tactics, preferring to entrench their forces into brutal assaults. Bellicose and barbaric in nature, the executioners show outright contempt for the trappings of more gaudy Astartes chapters. Carrying grim trophies of severed heads, claimed weapons, and other trinkets into battle, the show of a slain foe is enough to instill terror into the hearts of the enemies of the executioners. Using such trophies as proof of their slaughter tallies, such claimed spoils are discarded once verification of their kills are collated, unless proof of such a kill is of impressive enough pedigree to be preserved and adorn the Space Marine's armor. The metallic blue-tinted gunmetal grey of their panoplies of uniform design, the veterans of the chapter mark their pauldron and helmets with yellow paint to denote their rank. Battlefield specialty and squad identifiers adorn their knee plates, though the chapter does not utilize company markings on their armor. The chapter icon of the twin ebon axes on a red shield, honoring the deeds of their forebear, Fafnir Ran. This hallmark of the era of the Horus Heresy would adorn the shield of the Imperial Fifth Legion, whom had served with distinction alongside the Seneschal of the Seventh. Harboring an unusually high number of chaplains within their ranks, 3 of such so-called Death Speakers are assigned to each company of the chapter and report directly to their High Chaplain, known as the Lord Speaker of the Dead.
responsible for the precision record-keeping of each battle's victories, defeats, and actions. Such devoted analysis of their battlefield data allows for their continual analysis and correction of flaws in their battle doctrine. Captains of the chapter are known as warlords and are accorded greater autonomy than their subordinates. Serving under their chapter master, the High Executioner, such warlords alongside the Lord Speaker of the Dead, Chief Librarian, and Master of the Forge form the chapter's war council when planning their impending crusades and campaigns. Though the High Executioner bears seniority over any individual of the council, should a unanimous vote be set against the chapter master, the War Council has the authority to overthrow and replace their High Executioner, should consensus of his failure to lead the chapter be evident. Contesting leadership of the Executioner's chapter is a bloody affair, as any company captain ambitious enough to earn the title of High Executioner can challenge the serving chapter master at any time to a contest of combat, should he wish to replace his superior. Believing their chapter to have been created for the sole task of slaughtering humanity's greatest enemies, the Executioners care little for defensive engagements or deployments. Self-appointing themselves as the Emperor's headsman, each member of the chapter slays his foes with unrelenting fury in the hopes of perishing in battles worthy of legend. Their final act as a warrior recorded by their death speakers, to be chronicled as worthy executioners of the Emperor's will.
What can we learn from the ways of the Xenos? We can learn to hate. How does a soul drinker fight? As cold as the void, and as fast as the bullets from his bolter. What will our fight mean to the galaxy when we are dead? It will mean that the galaxy continues, for without every drop of Astartes' blood, it would crumble and fall. What do our enemies see when they look upon the Astartes? They see their gods and heroes of their corrupted myths, fathered before them and heralding the end of their world. The Soul Drinkers are a successor chapter of unknown origin and conflicting loyalties. Believed from their inception to be derived from the bloodline of the Primarch of the 7th Legion, Rogel Dawn, records indicate their creation to be prior to the 4th founding. Originally claiming to be that of the revered 2nd founding, for untold millennia, the Soul Drinkers charged into battle, shouting invocations such as "Cold and Fast, Soul Drinkers," or "For the Emperor and Freedom." Gifting a relic to each of his chapter descendants, Rogel Dawn entrusted unto the Soul Drinkers a vortex weapon known as the Soul Spear. Retrieved from a derelict world of darkness during the Great Crusade, the blood of great warp beasts had sated the spear's edge and proven a fitting means to hang Dawn's banner on conquered planets wherein he planted its haft. The records of the chapter chronicling their founding members to be drawn from the personal guard of the Black Templar, Sigismund. Among their first recorded campaigns waged would be that of the War of Beasts. Renowned for their service during the Reign of Blood, incited by the tyrannical Hive Lord of Terror, Goj Vandire, the Wars of Apostasy wrought a heavy toll on humanity, incurring the wrath of the Black Templars. Led by the then High Marshal, Sigenandus, an imperial crusade was declared against Vandire, the Imperial Fists, Firehawks, and Soul Drinkers answering the clarion call to destroy this wayward bureaucrat, laying siege to his ecclesiarchal palace. Yet for all their vaunted service, the Soul Drinkers' downfall loomed, and during the incident on the starfort of Laconia, the Inquisition would declare the chapter excommunicate traitoris. Finding the location of the long-lost relic of their past, the Soul Spear, following the loss of their flagship, Sanctifier, within the tides of the warp, their campaign enacted to retrieve the quintessential artifact to their identity, stoked tensions between the chapter and the Adeptus Mechanicus. Under orders of the Adeptus Ministorum, Magos Kobotov of the Mechanicus sought to reverse engineer the Soul Spear in order to unlock the secrets of its vortex mechanisms. The feud begun between the Soul Drinkers and Mechanicus, concluding with the destruction of the starfort of Laconia by the guns of the Astartes.
retreating into an asteroid field in order to evade persecution by the Emperor's Holy Inquisition. Infighting soon erupted within their ranks, as Chapter Master Gorgolian hoped to accede to the Inquisition's demands to kill those of his men who had fought on Laconia. Facing the senior officer responsible for the fall of Laconia in single combat, Librarian Sarpedon, the righteousness of the librarian's actions would be tested during the shield rite to defend his honor. Empowered by mutations of the Changer of Ways, which transformed his body into an 8-legged abomination, Sarpedon slew Gorgolian during the duel and claimed the title of Chapter Master for himself. Intending to use the Soul Drinkers as pawns in its great game, the Chaos God known as Tzeentch watched with glee as the Soul Drinkers renegades slaughtered all who opposed the rule of Sarpedon. Visited by the demon prince of Tzeentch, Abraxas, the entity offered Sarpedon the long-lost Soul Spear in exchange for their fealty, revealing the chapter's mutations to be the result of the favor of the Architect of Fate, rather than a gift of the Emperor. Ending the demon's life with the Soul Spear, Sarpedon refused to endorse the actions of Chaos and remained steadfastly loyal to the ideals of the Imperium despite his corruption by Chaos. Refusing to betray their oaths to the Emperor, the mutations which now ran rampant within their ranks did little to weaken their resolve. Scuttling their fleet, the chapter then boarded an immense space hulk to use as their new base of operations. Halting the spread of mutations thanks to the efforts of Apothecary Pallas using insight gleaned from the planetoid of Stratix Luminae, the sacrifice of Sergeant Telos and his men to retrieve such knowledge led to their complete surrender to the thrall of the blood god, Khorne. Requiring the purge of chaos-worshipping elements of his chapter, Sarpedon staved off the interference of the Crimson Fists under the command of Force Commander Renes, aided by Drukhari raiders as they attempted to kill Telos. Subduing Telos and allowing for the Inquisition to end his life with Exterminator's bombardment upon his base of operations, the chapter's infighting erupted once more as the Second Chapter War of the Soul Drinkers began. Bargaining the position of Chapter Master to Brother Eumenes in order to unite the chapter to repel the assaults of the Howling Griffins chapter, the so-called Black Chalice chapter, as they would be regarded by the Griffins, survived the persecution. Killing the usurper to his position, Eumenes, following their battle against the Howling Griffins, Sarpedon reneged on his truce to retain control of his position, yet allowed several Astartes to leave the chapter unharmed should they not interfere with his rule. Forging temporary alliances with branches of the Imperium to enable their survival, whilst fighting beside a Mechanicus Explorator fleet against the forces of the Necrons of Salaka, the Tech Priest relayed the Soul Drinker's position to the first captain of the Imperial Fist chapter, Darnath Lysander. Agreeing to a duel to vindicate their actions, Sarpedon fought Lysander in single combat, yet would be bested. His chapter forces taken aboard the Imperial Fist's fortress monastery, the Phalanx, to be judged for their actions. Revealing the ancient war scribe of the Soul Drinkers, Daniaphos, to have been found residing within a crypt upon the tomb world they had fought on, the Imperial Fist brought the Soul Drinkers to be judged, alongside their legendary veteran, during the trial. Presided over by members of the Crimson Fists, Howling Griffins, Iron Knights, Death Eagles, Silver Skulls, Angel Sanguine, Tech Priests of Mars, Inquisitorial Representatives, and even Sisters of the Adeptus Sororitas, the trial of the Blood Drinkers began with Chapter Master of the Imperial Fists, Vladimir Pugh, acting as Justice Lord of the court. Revealing the Soul Drinkers do not be descended from the bloodline of Rogel Dawn, gleaned from investigation conducted by the Angel Sanguine, this fell truth and innumerable accounts of heresy could never result in their sins being absolved. All but the Iron Knights chapter proclaimed the Soul Drinkers to be heretics, each involved party having lost lives and resources due to their involvement with the Renegades. In truth, this culmination of events was orchestrated by Abraxas and Daniaphos, the millennia in the making schemes of these disciples of Tzeentch, positioning the ancient dreadnought to seize the Phalanx. Freed from their confinement by manipulating members of the Order of the Blinded Eye, the Soul Drinkers located armaments and garrisoned the Librarium of the Phalanx, as Astartes of the Howling Griffins, Death Eagles, and Angel Sanguine suppressed their position. As Daniaphos sought to bring to fruition the heretical plans which had been in motion for 4 millennia, with aid from his apostle, Chaplain Iktinos, The pair used the drawn blood from the captured Iron Knight captain, Nicalo, to open the warp gate known as the Predator's Eye, hidden within the monastery by the Dreadnought during the Age of Apostasy. Using Sarpedon and his men as a distraction, Deinophos summoned Abraxas and its thralls to invade the Phalanx, the renegade soul drinkers begging for a chance to aid the Imperial Fists in banishing the forces of chaos. United by a common foe, the Imperial Fists agreed to the request of the soul drinker captain, Luco, to join forces, fighting by their side as Chapter Master Sarpedon confronted and killed his duplicitous chaplain, Ictenos. Refusing to be a pawn in Deinophos' grand scheme to rule the galaxy, Sarpedon fought the Dreadnought in single combat and carved his body from his sarcophagus using the Soul Spear's twin blades. Banishing the demonic forces from the Phalanx, the sacrifice of the Soul Drinkers had resulted in all of their number dying, save for two lonesome Astartes, Captain Luco and Sergeant Gravus, both escaping through the closing portal of the Predator's Eye. Presenting the remains of Deinophos to Vladimir Pugh, Chapter Master Sarpedon followed his last remaining men into the warp, never to be seen again. Declared extinct as a chapter, no records of the deeds of the Soul Drinkers would be permitted to remain etched within the annals of the Imperium's history, their sacrifice honored by the Imperial Fists as righteous kinsmen in the end. Reconstituted during the Era Indomitus due to the efforts of Belisarius Cawl, the Soul Drinkers revived their stature within the Imperium as members of the Ultima Founding, thanks to the insistence of the Imperial Fists to restore them to active duty. Adopting the heraldry of the chapter, whose records by now had been completely redacted by Imperial authorities, the Primaris Soul Drinkers embarked upon the stars to forge deeds anew. Ignorant of their ties to the history of their forebears, the Primaris Soul Drinkers earned many glories thanks to their service made during the Keprian Reclamation. However, with continued use of unorthodox tactics, the Reborn chapter once more drew scrutiny from the Emperor's Holy Inquisition, leading to their discovery of their ignoble forebears. Burdened with heresy, which etched a deep existential crisis within their very nature, the Soul Drinkers, though fighting with redoubled zeal and determination, regardless, fall short of removing such a stain from their honor. Masters of shock assaults, alike to the sons of Sanguinius, the Blood Angels, their mistaken belief as scions of the Praetorian has also influenced their battle doctrine to specialize in naval boarding actions and drop pod assaults. The original chapter, known to have required every battle brother to carry into battle a tome written by their hero of legend, Deinophos. The teachings of this war sage would be known as the Catechisms Martial, and prove invaluable. Peculiarly for a Space Marine chapter, though the Soul Drinkers do utilize scouts, they are not appointed as a means to train green recruits, preferring instead to assign aspirants to veteran battle brothers to learn from example. Their omophagia organ mutated to absorb the memories of sentience which the Soul Drinkers consume. Their ritual, known as the Ceremony of the Chalice, allows their battle brothers to see into their prey's very souls by experiencing even their emotional experience. Their mysterious past, alluding to their ties to the lost 2nd or 11th Legion, the scant records of the Imperial Fists assimilating such Astartes into the fold during the Great Crusade, alongside the Ultramarines, may bear some credence to such a claim. Clad in purple ceramite, adorned with bone-white iconography, gold pauldron trim and chest aquillas, these ornate Astartes, though bereft of the lineage they so cherished, continue to fight in the colors they bled to uphold. The symbol of their chapter, a golden chalice spewing 5 spirals of soul energy, centered on a golden laurel wreath on a field of purple, epitomizes their arcane yet noble bearing. Burdened with the insight of their former chapter's manipulations into serving the whims of chaos, perhaps the Soul Drinkers shall with time galvanize their duty to serve the Imperium. For each who falls in the name of the Emperor believes they shall rise again to fight at the side of Rogel Dawn in the final battle to save humanity.
We attack without warning, mercy, or hesitation. Let the enemies of mankind know that we will purge every last one of them, and let them shake in fear.
The Iron Knights are a successor chapter of the Imperial Fists of unknown founding. Sired after the 32nd millennium, these sons of their homeworld, Brycantia, are reputed as the only scions of Rogel Dawn to have won the centennial chapter-spanning Feast of Blades competition on 2 successive years by the efforts of the same Astartes, Hervald Strom. Brycantia's surface committed to produce massive quantities of weapons and ammunition for their chapter overlords. The Iron Knights benefit greatly from their bountiful manufactorums. A portion of their strength defecting as a warband of chaos known as the Iron Brethren, the Iron Knights seek out all reports of their shameful kinsmen with the hopes of cleansing their reputation. Renowned for their service during the War of Beasts as part of the Last Wall Protocol, these valiant Astartes also pledged a company of their men during the 13th Black Crusade of Abaddon the Despoiler, despite being on a penitent crusade. Experts of planetary sieges against heavily fortified enemy positions, the chapter uses Terminator squads supported by Predator and Land Raider tanks to achieve victory. Clad in blue gunmetal ceramite, adorned with black pauldron insets and helmets, each Astartes marks their tactical role with grey paint on both their pauldrons. The symbol of their chapter, a white cross on a field of black, is uniquely placed on a guard race heraldic shield, rather than their pauldrons. Delighting in the sport of war, the Iron Knights never shy away from any trial which may test their martial skill, committing to fight among the most extreme battlefield environments.
After a period of recuperation, the subjects were instructed in the methods of combating the demonic, trained in the use of the 666 verses of the Book of Exorcisms, and equipped with the weapons of an exorcist. The 2 companies were then put into action on a demon-infested world on the northern fringes of the Eye of Terror. With a squad of Grey Knights held in reserve, the Exorcist Space Marines achieved a kill ratio of 97-1. Impressive under normal circumstances, but against the demonic, I'm sure you'll agree that these figures clearly indicate that the procedure is both safe and effective.
The Adeptus Astartes are a myriad arsenal, each chosen to combat specific threats to the Imperium. Molded from the genetic legacy of the Primarchs, whilst each of the Emperor's sons embodies traits for his successors to aspire to, some qualities when taken to their extreme can incur heavy consequences and derision. For today, we shall elucidate a successor chapter devoted to the exploitation of powers beyond the pale of material comprehension. The valiant, yet misunderstood sons of Banish, the Exorcists. During the Dark Era between the 35th and 36th millennium, a new breed of Space Marines would be crafted. Records that remain are scant, yet the tale of the so-called Dark Founding of successor chapters of the Angels of Death would live in infamy. None know the extent of how many chapters would be created from the 13th founding, yet what is known is that all were created from pure gene seed tithed by every legion of the Astartes long ago to the Adeptus Terra. Most records of such chapters would be redacted from Imperial records, with only 2 remaining as common knowledge, the Death Spectres and Exorcists. Ordering a classification known as the Bull Absolute upon their foundation, the High Lords of Terror denied all knowledge of the chapter's primogenitor to be known to its ranks, though none know why such secrecy would be required. Speculation persists that this mysterious founding had been initiated by order of the Emperor's Holy Inquisition, for with time, the chapter would share strong bonds with the clandestine and powerful organization. Whether created as a vainglorious experiment or to cater to a specific need of the Orders is unknown. Only one fragment of evidence remains of their creation. Laurum Cleland, an Adeptus Mechanicus xenobiologist, had sent a communication to members of the Ecclesiarchy, seconded to the Ordo Malleus of the Inquisition. Leader of the delegation, Cardinal Rodrigo Nessun of the radical Plutonian sect had been driven mad after witnessing the casualty rate of the initiates of the chapter, and in turn fell to the clutches of the ruinous powers. Now worshipping chaos and freeing the failed aspirants, Cardinal Nessun would see to the creation of a Chaos Space Marine warband, the Swords of Epiphany. Not allowing such heresy to stain their honor, the Exorcists, once battle-ready, took to the stars, and under the command of their captain, Veon Armadel, hunted their fallen kin. Armadel's purge saw to the extinction of the Swords of Epiphany, and with the death of the corrupted Cardinal, the Exorcists had absolved themselves of sin. The records of their creation sealed away by order of the Inquisition, to preserve their new method of felling the denizens of the warp from the more puritanical elements of imperial bureaucracy. Bequeathed a vast fleet of warships, and taking to the void of space, the Exorcists began to carve a legacy as noble and forthright warriors. Yet upon the besieged world of Totem 4, the chapter's future would be changed forever. The human colonies of the Totem system had long distinguished themselves as free-spirited yet erstwhile servants of the Emperor. Unknowingly playing into the hands of the greater demon of Tzeentch, Keriath, the Shrouded, their independence laid the path for corruption, manipulation, and damnation. As the forces of Keriath invaded the system, the Exorcists would be dispatched to contain the spread of chaos. Exceedingly resilient against their opponents, the Exorcists, by some happenstance of genetics or blessing of the Emperor, proved to be exceedingly effective in combating the forces of Tzeentch, and upon the soil of Totem 4, they would boldly advance through the enemy lines. Angering Keriath beyond measure, the pawn of Tzeentch sought out the chapter master of the Exorcists, Enoch Trismegistus, in an attempt to commit the entirety of its psychic might into his mind. Succumbing to the immense power of the greater demon, Enoch's possession seemingly would carry the day in the name of the Changer of Ways. Yet Enoch fought on, unwilling to lose the battle within his mind. During his struggle, Enoch saw insights pertaining to the weakness of his foe. Reaching out to the mind of his chief librarian, Goetos, the two warriors banished Keriath from the material realm and hearkened a new era for their chapter. Plutonian spies who had infiltrated the menial ranks of the Exorcists reported the occurrence to the Ordo Malleus and demanded authority to relieve command from Enoch and establish a new base of operations upon the world of Banish. Interrogating Trismegistus for solar months, Enoch proved to be free of the taint of chaos. Absolved of scrutiny and reinstated as the chapter master of his kinsmen, Enoch worked alongside the Plutonians to pursue a means to use the weapons of chaos against themselves. Imbued with the vast knowledge he had gleaned from the greater demon, Enoch saw the Inquisition's plans as crucial to combating the forces of chaos, and began to instate new methods and rituals for his chapter to undertake. Partnering with the Plutonians and establishing a fortress monastery upon the soil of Banish, Enoch Trismegistus oversaw the possession of every one of his chapter's Astartes in order to replicate his own experience. Banishing the entities from his brethren, those that survived found their minds imbued with arcane knowledge and constitution enriched through tests of mental and physical fortitude. Venturing to a world to the north of the Eye of Terror, 200 Astartes of the Exorcists would fight for survival on a desolate demon-infested planet, as a squadron of the Ordo Malleus' Chamber Militant, the Grey Knights, stood in reserve should they prove to be necessary. Achieving a kill ratio of 97-1 against the demon hordes, their efficacy could not be denied, despite the derision of the 666th chapter. The Exorcists more than ever befitted their new creed. The revelations wrought from their trials had ascended the chapter above that of typical Astartes. Following the birth of the Great Rift, the Cicatrix Maledictum across the galaxy, the need for the Exorcists to combat the forces of the Immaterium has never been more pressing. Deployed far and wide across the void to quell heretical uprisings across Imperium Nihilus, their reinforcement of Primaris Space Marines could not have been timelier.
The Torchbearer fleet, commanded by the Emperor's custodians, beset with concerted assaults from the forces of chaos. The Dark Gods attempted in vain to prevent the Primaris from reaching Banish, with the knowledge of the potent threat they would pose. Every Grey Shield appointed to the fleet perished in battle, delivering only the methods and technologies required of the Magi Biologus to transform the Firstborn Marines of Banish. Despite providing no proof as to their claims of evolving their Astartes of the chapter into more powerful warriors, the Exorcists took to their surgeries with no thought for failure. No Firstborn Marine would remain, for now the Exorcists had evolved into stronger Space Marines, gifted increased capabilities to hunt the denizens of the Warp and deny their fell patrons. Hailing from the feral world of Banish, within proximity to the borders of the Narasima Straits, the Exorcists, though relegated to a quarantined sector of Imperial space, are not confined. Campaigning across the void, utilizing their vast fleet of free battle barges and as many as a dozen smaller voidcraft, the chapter must regardless return on regular occasions to refit their arsenal, replenish their numbers, and consult their vast tomes of arcane knowledge. Housing prisoners within the bowels of their fortress monastery, the Basilica Malefics, the harboring of several Ordo Malleus research facilities of the radical Plutonians allows for interrogations of demons and heretics to be facilitated. Outfitted with training facilities, armories, and the chapter gene seed stores, the chapter must station a portion of its men to stand vigil upon Banish in order to protect their charges of the Ordo Malleus and repositories of Arcanum. Bereft of natural resources or industry, the feral world draws little attention from outside influence. The primitive human tribes descended from prospectors of the world breed hardy aspirants for induction into the chapter as neophytes. Undergoing demonic possession therapy under tight supervision, every Astartes of the Exorcist must be possessed by a demon of the Warp within the Hall of Tempering of their fortress monastery. Allowing their bodies to become host to the entity for 12 hours, with the aid of a demon hunter of the Ordo Malleus, the aspirant shall be exorcised. Some aspirants at this stage are too broken to become fully fledged Space Marines, their minds and bodies broken under the strain, with most requiring reconstructive surgery for the wounds they incur. Mind-wiping worthy candidates of the chapter who have staved off possession with aid from the Plutonians within the Hall of Tempering. Such neophytes train further within the Cloister of Scars training grounds. Allowed to recuperate for a time, these successful aspirants shall be taught the means to combat demons. Failed aspirants are deemed as broken ones and befall a variety of potential fates. Becoming permanently possessed, transforming into chaos spawn, or living in vegetative or even endless torment, it is the duty of the chapter to cull such wretches or reutilize them as vessels to imprison captured demonic entities. Preventing these immortal beings from returning to the Immaterium, once caged within their prisons of flesh, the broken ones are strewn to the far corners of the galaxy, within the prison craft known as the Purgatomb. The pitch-black voidcraft, harboring untold numbers within its mammoth confines, screams of agony fill the warded cells of its bowels, and conceal the devastating cost of the chapter's ascension through demonic possession therapy. Burying the slain of the chapter within the center of the cloister, battle brothers of the chapter meditate to their fallen dead, whilst the officers of the chapter preside over the outer walls within their reclusiam, apothecarian, armory, and council chamber. The massive, thick blast doors leading to the chapter's librarian, guarded by sentries at all times. The records of the chapter's battles are transcribed by the chief librarian and his men, and detail the methods used to quell their demonic opponents. The air thick with a haze of incense, the vaults of the librarium are adorned with hexagrammatic wards, preventing the infiltration of the malevolent beings of the Warp. Learning by heart every one of the 666 verses of the Liber Exorcismus by heart, each Space Marine of the chapter must sunder the 7 seals of Salamaneth to be accepted as a worthy member of their creed. Receiving immense hatred from both ecclesiarchy and Space Marine bodies such as the Black Templars and Space Wolves for their use of forbidden knowledge, The Exorcist's strong ties to the Inquisition counter calls for their censure or disillusion. Able to cut through the bureaucracy of the High Lords of Terror due to their alliance, their integration of Primaris Space Marines has only further strengthened their effectiveness, both politically and militarily. Deployed to war zones against any and all foes, those specialists at countering warp incursions, the Sons of Rogul Dawn do not shy away from facing Xenos threats, and are adept at performing reconnaissance missions. Always one step ahead of their enemies, due to not only their intel gathering expertise, but also arcane foresight, their Scout Marines are a cut above most Astartes chapters due to their immense demands placed upon them. Present during the Badab War, Abaddon the Despoiler's 12th and 13th Black Crusades, and even the Third War for Armageddon, the chapter's battle honors and deeds made in the name of the Imperium are beyond reproach. Venerated as among only 4 chapters to have served during the campaigns of the Third War and 13th Black Crusade, only a fool would decry the valor of the Exorcists or openly deride their service record. For while their methods verge on the path of heresy, their actions in defending the Emperor's dominion lend further credence to their effectiveness. As a Codex-compliant chapter, the Exorcists perceive the tome of Rabute Guilliman alike to a holy text. Drawing from the iconography and conventions of the Ultramarines and their successors heavily, only a few deviations of their creed exist among the chapter. Whilst the Exorcists follow the guidelines of 100 Astartes per battle company, peculiarly, the chapter exceeds the commonplace amount of 10 companies, and instead fields 12. Their 11th and 12th companies, exclusively comprised of scout novitiates. Due to the Exorcist's incredibly dangerous initiation process, the chapter requires surplus numbers to fight at full strength. Said to have a fatality rate of 80%, neophytes who have already survived the grueling process of trials, alike to other Space Marine chapters, are further dwindled from their failed possession by demonic entities. Overseen by the Master of Recruits and members of the Reclusium, though each scout can vary in their progression of training, their close monitoring and seclusion from the main battle companies prevents corruption from spreading. The chapter's 10th company, though originally their primary Scout Marine contingent of proven Space Marines, has now been eschewed with the introduction of Primaris Space Marines into their ranks. Now fielding Vanguard Space Marines, the 10th Company facilitates covert operations never before attempted by the chapter, whilst the 11th and 12th Companies have expanded their size to accommodate the shortfall. Forming subcults known as Orisons within their number, these esoteric cloisters of exceptional warriors are not limited to singular membership, allowing for overlapping adherence to several Orisons. Though overwhelmingly attributed to veterans of the chapter, acceptance within any of such orders is among the highest honors of the chapter. Arranging meetings within the Orison shrines, housed within the Cloister of Scars at the heart of their fortress monastery, the Basilica Malefics, the libraries of secret knowledge housed within are maintained and expanded by their disciples. Regarding fledgling members as Brother Initiates and other such titles, layers of enigmatic organizational structures underpin the chapter's hierarchy. The Broken Tower cult near exclusively recruits librarians into their order, whilst other Orisons, such as the Obelisk Phalamus, caters to Devastator and Tech Marines. The most prestigious Orison, the Enochian Guard, is comprised solely of First Company veterans and is named after the prestigious chapter master of legend, Enoch Trimegistus. The Shrine of Enochians, housing the most powerful lore of the chapter, whilst its doors remain open to any who wish to study or pray. Only the most venerated heroes of the chapter are permitted membership. Each member of the Enochian Guard must slay a demon in single combat to fit the requirements for membership, yet even then must be sponsored by 2 standing members. Limiting displays of membership to such orders, the Enochians prefer to adorn their armor with scripture of the Liber Exorcismus as a sign of their pedigree, by way of carving or wrapping long parchments around their armor. Each battle brother of the chapter, must guard themselves from the machinations of both physical and spiritual assault, and as such require protection in excess of standard Space Marines. Engraving and etching sigils onto their power armor and weaponry, the hexagrammatic symbols of arcane origin stave off the corrupting influence of the warp and their fell pawns. Each warrior of the chapter bearing their stigmata of trauma from their successful exorcism of possession. Each individual bears varying stains on their souls due to the innumerable forms of each unique demon exorcised from their bodies. Once leaving the halls of tempering, new initiates must come to terms with the imprint of their possessor, which can vary from paranoia if coupled with a demon of Siege, or lingering bloodlust if torn from the grasp of a servant of Khorne. Carving runes into their flesh, which induce pain when in the presence of warp witchery, such icons suddenly forewarn each Astartes of impending doom. Though many of such carvings are cut deep, other potent yet smaller icons of lacerations never fully heal into scar tissue, requiring regular repurification to stave off the corrupting influence of chaos. Exorcists often exhibit eyes of a discolored pallor, with some individuals bearing scaly flesh or even small, spiny growths, which protrude from their limbs and scalp. Such anomalies are not seen as signs of corruption within the chapter, for such warp-derived mutations are a reminder of their righteous victory over the unholy powers of the warp. Though to show such signs openly to the wider Imperium would be naive, and as such, to prevent censure by inquisitorial bodies, the exorcists conceal or even replace such growths with augmetics. Bolstering their mental fortitude with such intimate dominion of the denizens of the Immaterium, exorcist Astartes are difficult to corrupt using psychic manipulations. Rumored to possess arcane abilities far in excess of typical Space Marines, their compliance to the Codex Astartes and strict adherence to the conventions of the Librarius does not give credence to such speculation. The chapter assumes deep red armor, with veterans marking their seniority with bone-white trim and helmets. The elite First Company sport black shoulder guards to symbolize their delving of the depths of pure darkness. Each Astartes marks their tactical speciality on their right pauldron, whether it be battle line, close support, fire support, veteran, or command staff. Squad markings are designated in high Gothic numerals on their right pauldron, with each company derived by the color of their trim, as outlined by the Codex Astartes. Their chapter icon of a script-engraved, bone-white horned skull upon a field of crimson exemplifies their duty to combat the forces of chaos, instilling fear into the hearts of mortals and demons alike. Despite their maligned reputation among the peers of the Angels of Death, the exorcists carry themselves as noble and stoic warriors. Honorable in their dealings with imperial organizations and regarded for their calm when not engaged in battle, their intelligent and measured demeanor contrasts starkly when in the heat of battle. Intensely aggressive even for the ranks of the most bloodthirsty Astartes, the exorcists exploit the weaknesses in enemy positions with relentless and decisive applications of force. Forever at risk of being scrutinized by the Inquisition as radicals, the exorcist must maintain a constant resolve to never invite censure and champion pragmatism above all virtues. Immune to among the most deceptive enticements of chaos, the exorcists, while capable of utilizing the weapons of their enemies, must weigh such overwhelmingly efficient battlefield victories over more mundane imperial combat doctrine and orthodoxy. Forever balancing their expertise with saving face, the chapter retains very close ties to the Inquisition in order to bargain leniency and sanction for their methods. Incredibly rational in nature, every member of the Exorcist boasts a deep understanding of forbidden knowledge of the Warp and its champions, for in understanding their enemies, they are equipped to effectively slay them. Said to know wars and banishment rites by memory, despite their intense training and mastery of combating demonic foes, they are in no way comparable to the clandestine elite demon hunters, the Grey Knights. Looked down upon by their betters, the Grey Knights see the Sons of Dawn as little more than a mongrel breed, unaware of the true danger they invite into their ranks. Regardless, the chapter combats not just warp entities, but also a whole host of the Imperium's enemies across the stars, whether Xenos or heretical in nature. Their gene lineage of the Praetorian, further bolstering their incorruptible nature, their stalwart defiance to submit to the whims of the Dark Gods despite such a proud history, not even the majority of the chapter know their own heritage. Only the elite First Company are privy to their ties to their Primarch, and to conceal such secrecy, no ties exist between their primogenitor chapter, nor their numerous successors. Guarding their honored past with immense pride, the First Company exorcists are further emboldened with the knowledge of their bloodline. Incredibly adaptable and unpredictable in battle, the exorcists fight in a trance-like state whilst employing strange occult mental arts. Devoid of pain or fear, even when confronted by the most malign of forces, with which the enemies of the Imperium can deploy, the Exorcist's mental fortitude exceeds any comparable Space Marine chapter, with exception given to a select few, such as the Grey Knights. For while they lack the resources of the holy demon hunters of the Emperor, the Exorcists remain an indomitable force of the Imperium, and continue to defend the master of mankind's domain from among the most devastating champions of the Immaterium.
By my will, I deny thee. By my heart, I spurn thee. By my hand, I destroy thee. Fiend of emptiness, to the void I cast thy blackened soul. Your future life shall be a series of trials, one after the other, until you attain the glory that is your due at the side of the Emperor. You shall face the hardest first, so that we know we are not wasting our time.
The Celestial Lions are a successor chapter of the Adeptus Astartes, serving during the era Indomitus. Descended from the Imperial Fifth Legion, the Sons of Rogel Dawn would be founded during the 38th millennium, suspected to be of the 23rd Sentinel founding. Fighting alongside the Emperor's Spears and Star Scorpions chapters as part of the Adeptus Valeri, the so-called Sentinels of the Veil would defend the region of space known as Ilara's Veil. Serving with distinction as a noble and stoic chapter for 4,000 Terran Standard years, the Lions would regardless suffer terrible misfortune during 948.M41 when assaulting the world of Qatar. A world pledged to the Ecclesiarchy, the priesthood of Qatar would be enthralled by the ruinous powers and pledge their worship to the Prince of Pleasure, Slaanesh. Inquisitor Apollyon would petition reinforcement from the Celestial Lions, led by Captain Saul, to purge the rebellion upon the surface of Qatar. Crushing all heretics in their wake, the Celestial Lions, whilst attempting to depart from the surface, would be orbitally bombarded by the guns of the Inquisition. Believing the rot to have set in too deep, Apollyon would be denounced by the chapter, yet seek reprisal for his reprimand. During the Third War for Armageddon, the Celestial Lions would commit its entire chapter strength to aid in the defense of High Volcanus. Suffering catastrophic casualties during their months of battle, the intel reports forwarded to the chapter would prove incredibly inaccurate in forecasting the strength of their opposition and their capabilities. Ambushed continuously during the war, the chapter would lose countless Thunderhawk transports and void ships due to corrupted orders. Suspecting intentional sabotage of their maneuvers, the command staff of the chapter would nonetheless endure their misfortune. Losing 4 companies in their entirety during their ambush at the Mannheim Gap at the hands of several Gargants and Razor Speed Freaks, led by the Orc warlord, Fogfang. The Celestial Lions would incur losses never before suffered by their forebears. Attacking the base camp of the Lions, the Greenskins would slay untold Astartes with Warlord Fogfang, killing and consuming Captain Valorak as a last act of defilement. Targeting the apothecaries of the chapter, all hope of recovering the gene seed of the Fallen would be hopeless,
Yet orcs are not known for utilizing long-range marksmanship, and thus further suspicion would be evidence of foul play. Evidence of scorch marks made by long las rounds would penetrate the eye lenses of chapter officers' helmets as the surviving 96 Astartes of the Lions escaped the devastation of their ranks. The final apothecary of the chapter would be found hours following their escape. A las round burned through his temple as his carcass slumped against a rhino transport. Assisted by the Reclusiarch of the Black Templars chapter, Merrick Grimaldus, following a petition for aid from the Death Speaker, Julkara, Grimaldus would seek answers for the unnerving hastened depletion of his kindred chapter. With order from High Marshal Helbrecht, Grimaldus would investigate the circumstance of the Celestial Lions and meet with their survivors within Hive Volcanus. Swearing to die as a last act of pride for their ravaged chapter, the Celestial Lions under the command of Pride Leader Ekeni Dubaku would resolve to extinguish the last spark of their proud chapter in a blaze of glory. From such a suicidal action, Grimaldus would marshal the remaining defenders of Hive Hellsreach in the wake of his legend as the hero of Hellsreach to aid the Celestial Lions and march to slay the Orc war boss. Believing such an act would inspire his cousin chapter to rebuild their might once more. I am returning on the war world. Someone must fight alongside the Lions, saving them from futile glory and the worst excesses of their otherwise pure blood. The Lions have no chaplains remaining, and they are our cousins. Honor and brotherhood demand this of me. The Lions cannot call upon the resources of their hive city, but they will not fight alone. Let Volcanus hide behind its walls. Hellsreach is going to war. Losing many of the survivors of the Celestial Lions during the engagement, the Sons of Dawn would nonetheless prove worthy of achieving victory, and with the death of war boss Fogfang, the chapter's honorable heroes would be avenged. High Marshal Helbrecht would demand that Ekeni Dubaku must assume the oath and mantle of Chapter Master of the Celestial Lions and grant him a suit of ancient artificer armor from the Black Templars' armory, bearing the heraldry of the Imperial Fist Legion. Departing to their homeworld aboard the strike cruiser gifted by the Black Templars, Blade of the Seventh Sun, the Celestial Lions would, with the aid of a detachment of the Templars, begin to rebuild their chapter. Upon their homeworld of Elysium I, whilst rebuilding the chapter's might, Ilara's Vale would be invaded by the Chaos Warband known as the Exilarchy, led by the remnants of the Chaos-corrupted chapter, once known as the Star Scorpions. Preemptively evacuating the populace of their doomed homeworld, Ekeni Dubaku would beseech the chapter master of the Emperor's Spears, Arokatus, to rehome his people on their homeworld of Nemeton. Once more hounded by the Inquisition, Dubaku would be slain by a Kalidas assassin aboard the starship Hex. The vendetta between the Lions and the Inquisition remaining to this day. Due to their near extinction fighting the Greenskins of Armageddon, the Celestial Lions reserve a special hatred for the Orc Xenos. Regarding them as kine, or cattle, by their native tongue, the Lions honor the glories won by their fallen brothers by regaling their men with stories of their battles against impossible odds against the Greenskin Tide. Prideful and principled in their morals, it is no wonder that their hatred and contempt for Inquisitional agents remain strong to this day. Embracing the conventions of the Codex Astartes, though adherent to many of its principles, the chapter regardless does stray from some of its advisements. Tactical designations of their senior officers are unique among their chapter and reflect the cultural trappings of their homeworld. Captains are known as war leaders and are designated by wearing black helmets. Chaplains are known as death speakers, with their librarians regarded as spirit walkers and apothecaries named life binders. Companies are known as prides, with each led by their equivalent of sergeants or pride leaders. Clad in golden armor, with azure blue pauldrons and helmets, the Celestial Lions mark their squad roll upon their right shoulder guard with a black Gothic numeral centered upon its design to indicate their company number. Organizing and mixing flexible combined arms to create well-balanced battle groups to combat any threat, the Celestial Lions are swift in their attack, to better overwhelm their disorganized opponents. Bearing their chapter icon with pride on their left pauldron, a roaring white lion head upon a field of azure blue, the most senior ranked Astartes of the chapter adopt a gold variation to denote their superiority. Though due to their severely depleted numbers, few veterans remain, and the survivability of the chapter seems destined to fail. Yet for each dawn brought to the Lions of the Vale, they shall not relent in facing the opponents of the Imperium, no matter the cost, and no matter the danger.
Dream the Emperor's dream, brother. No man of the Imperium need fall by the heretic's hand. Not where there is a Hospitaller to honor his final duty. The Hospitallers are a successor chapter of the Imperial Fists. Derived from the 24th founding, speculated to have been created during the 39th millennia, this pious chapter is infamous for their wholesale rejection of the Codex Astartes teachings. Believing the Master of Mankind to be a true god, their unwavering adherence to the Imperial Creed allows for their regular collaboration with the Adeptus Ministorum. Tasked with defending the trade and pilgrimage routes of the Segmentum Obscurus, these noble scions of Rogel Dawn mimic their cousins of the Black Templars in protecting the weak by conducting righteous crusades. Dividing their men into 3 large companies, rather than the Codex-compliant 10, each Astartes upholds the sacred vows of their chapter to protect the weak and deliver the Emperor's justice to his enemies. Their 3rd company tasked with offensive operations, whilst the 2nd guards strategically valuable outposts. Peculiarly, the chapter does not possess an official 1st company and prefer to assign their veterans to an elite band known as the Vigil. Their sizable fleet, originally led by their imposing battle barge, etched with the litanies of the Corpus Divinitatis, shield of the God Emperor, the Hospitallers gave praise to the Master of Mankind within its mixture of mausoleums, cathedrals, and places of worship. Their strategium always filled with choirs of gene eunuchs singing hymns. Unfortunately for the Hospitallers, their venerated flagship would be lost during joint compliance with the Iron Hands chapter upon the night world of Fabris Calibant. Assaulting the shield of the God Emperor in order to steal the dreadnought chassis of brother Augustin Galvaro, the Iron Hands' actions made to save their own First Sergeant, Telach, has stoked a bitter hatred for the sons of Ferrus Manus within the Hospitallers. Clad in white ceramite, adorned with yellow pauldron trim and chest aquillas, each Space Marine wears silver helmets, red tactical rolls, and checkered heraldry on their left knee plate. The symbol of their chapter, a red Maltese cross on a field of white. Peculiarly for an Astartes chapter, it is worn proudly on both of their pauldrons and right knee guard. Granting the Emperor's peace to those who suffer, the utmost duty of the Hospitallers is to defend wounded souls until their recovery, or deliver them to a painless demise. This is the first battle I will fight today. To these other chapters, it is typical of the Astral Knights to go our own way and expect them to accommodate us. The Red Consuls strip away everything they were before recruitment. They are soldier and no more. The invaders have no time for politics at all. They would far rather be up to their elbows in the dead. And the Ultramarines think themselves the model of a Space Marine chapter, and anyone who does not follow the Codex as they do is wayward or worse. We shall have to leave them to their convictions, Captain. We do what we must do. The Astral Knights were a successor chapter of the Imperial Fists. Sired during an unknown founding, this dour branch of the bloodline of Rogel Dawn resolved disputes through duels of honor witnessed by their chapter master, conducted within an arena upon a carpet of crystalline crimson. Armed with crystal soul-shard blades, dyed by their homeworld sun, the Eye of Obsidia. Each was crafted by their user, following their rite of passage as initiates, when scouring the plains of the Obsidian Vaults for a gem which calls out to be claimed.
revered for their service during the castigation of Acrolem in collaboration with the Flesh Terrors and Grey Knights chapters. This noble creed of the Adeptus Astartes made the ultimate sacrifice after millennia of service to the Emperor during their final battle of Safehold. Alongside 15 chapters of the Adeptus Astartes, the Astral Knights commit the vast majority of their chapter to combat the Necron world engine of the Vidar sector, the planet-sized voidcraft armed with Gauss projectors, proving capable of scouring entire ecosystems from any planet it targeted. Giving their lives dearly to prevent the Imperium's domains from falling to the world engine, the remaining 30 Astral Knights who survived the campaign would be subsumed into the Sable Swords chapter of Space Marines, who now maintain the Astral Knights Fortress Monastery on the world of Obsidia. Angered by the temerity of the Sable Swords to command his men, Venerable Dreadnought Brother Fade would instead be offered a chance by Sable Sword Chapter Master Dagon to take a ship of his fleet and wage a final crusade against the enemies of the Imperium until their extinction. Clad in silver ceramite, adorned with blue pauldron and knee plate trim, each Space Marine marked their tactical role with blue paint on their right pauldron. Their squad identifier marked with white logothic numerals atop such designs. The chapter designated their company on their left knee plate, with each veteran donning tabards and cloaks. The symbol of their chapter, two white crossed swords on a field of silver, exemplified their austere and noble character, inherited from their Primarch. Honored by the Blood Angels captain, Donatos Apheo, who refused to see the sacrifice of his comrades in arms to be forgotten, a monument of 772 Arbalastone statues were erected around the wreckage of their battle barge, Tempestus, which still stands upon Safehold. Guarded by Astartes of a dozen Space Marine chapters, who stood by the side of the Astral Knights at the moment of their sacrifice, 2 Blood Angels of the Second Company are permanently assigned to stand vigil at their side. The legacy of these Sons of Dawn, heralded as among the greatest sacrifices ever made by a chapter of the Space Marines. The Death Strike are a successor chapter of the Imperial Fists of unknown founding. Embarking from their fortress monastery of Nihilas, little is known about this chapter, save for their gloried service during the assault on Fort Moros, Verdun Wars, cleansing of the Ulik sector, and Abaddon the Despoiler's 13th Black Crusade. Clad in dark blue ceramite, adorned with silver chestaquillas, the chapter designates their tactical role with stenciled yellow markings on their right pauldron. Their company identified similarly with high Gothic numerals on their right knee plate, using the prescribed Codex Astartes outlined color scheme. The symbol of their chapter, a winged lightning bolt on a field of blue, epitomizes their nature as sudden assault experts. Upholding the legacy of Rogul Dawn, with no thought for retreat nor relent, these mysterious scions of the Vigilant stave off the enemies of the Imperium on their own terms.
That which serves the glory of the God Emperor is just and will endure. That which harms the Imperium built by his children is false, and shall be purged by flame and sword. With burning hearts and cool heads, we shall overcome that which has offended the Emperor's will. Our victory is ordained. Our victory is ensured by our faith in the Emperor.
The Emperor's Warbringers are a successor chapter of the Imperial Fists of unknown origin. Renowned for their service during their search for a relic upon the planet of Volscus, their mission to retrieve a bolt pistol once wielded by the Ultramarines Primarch Rebute Gilliman during his purge of the heretic Baron Unferth proved unworthy of their toil. In truth, a weapon bearing the accursed Eye of Horus, Chaplain Valak of the Emperor's Warbringers decried the false accounts of the Ecclesiarchy, who had rewritten Volscus' history to be more palatable to the Imperium. Destroying the relic sidearm of the fell War Master despite the protestations of the Emperor's Holy Inquisition, Captain Phasas offered the attendant Inquisitor to return to Titan a hero who removed a Chaos relic from the galaxy, or be proclaimed a Horusian radical to be slain by his hand.
clad in dark olive green ceramite, adorned with black chest aquillas. Each Space Marine marks their tactical role with black paint on their right pauldron, using white low Gothic numerals to indicate their squad. Using the space of their left lower greave to identify their company, the chapter uses Codex-compliant color scheme roundlets, emphasized with black low Gothic numerals. The symbol of their chapter, a pair of crossed black swords on a field of olive green, epitomizes their duty to guard the Imperium from the Emperor's enemies. Routinely eschewing their customary regalia in favor of camouflage for both their armor and vehicles, these adaptable and fearsome warriors unleash targeted devastation upon the foes of the Master of Mankind. The Hammers of Dawn are a successor chapter of the Imperial Fists of unknown founding. Holding themselves to exacting standards in their adherence to the tenets of the Codex Astartes, their rivalry with the Ultramarines over procedure has become infamous. Respectful of the Lord of Ultramar, Roboute Guilliman's writings, it is the view of the Hammers of Dawn that the Codex is nonetheless lost on his sons, and only the disciples of the Imperial Fists can master its teachings. Said to have been sired during the early years of the 41st millennium, this upstart chapter has regardless earned countless victories during campaigns such as the Achilles Crusade and Nightfire Wars. Obsessive in their adoration of their Primarch, Rogal Dorn, his hammers revere the vigilance deeds made during the Siege of Terra and defense of the Throne World. Hateful of the Wordbearer's Legion, due to their stature as the nemesis of the Ultramarines, the Hammers of Dawn seek to humble the Scions of Guilliman by purging their most hated foe. Favoring units such as Devastators, Terminators, Vindicator siege tanks and dreadnoughts, their lack of maneuverability is more than compensated by their overwhelming heavy firepower. Clad in black ceramite, adorned with gold trim and chest aquillas, the chapter marks their tactical role with gold paint on their right pauldron, using white high Gothic stencils atop such designs to mark their squad and Codex-compliant colored company stripes on their left knee plate. The symbol of their chapter, a brass fist clutching a hammer imposed on the Imperial laurel on a field of black, a sight to behold for any loyal subject of the Imperium. Their duty to proclaim their Primarch as the truest son of the Emperor by virtue of their deeds made in his name, the zeal of these Astartes in less than a millennia has become legend.
The deeds of one bold warrior can alter the course of a battle. I have 4 such men under my command, and our every deed changes the shape of the galaxy.
The Invaders are a successor chapter of the Imperial Fists of unknown founding. Among the most stubborn sons of Rogal Dorn, within a creed noted for its intractable nature, few chapters of the Adeptus Astartes strike emotions of such dread into the enemies of the Imperium. Unwilling to ever suffer defeat, no matter the cost, their daring, if not impetuous nature, earns them victories aplenty, despite the grievous losses they incur. Caring not for civilian casualties should their objectives be achieved, these callous Astartes are regularly in a state of suboptimal strength due to their proclivity to face the deadliest enemies with no thought for self-preservation. Mind-wiping their surviving kinsmen to better hurl them once more into the fires of war, it is whispered that such actions also relieve their warriors from the guilt of their many atrocities committed to achieve compliance. Launching an assault on the craft world Idare during 852.M41, the beleaguered Eldar, already diminished from their combat with the Tyranids, were reduced to little more than corpses and husks of Wraithbone. Enacting a bitter counterattack upon the invaders' homeworld of Ogris, Craftworld Alatok achieved vengeance for their fallen kinsmen with the destruction of the chapter's Fortress Monastery. Diminished to 300 Astartes, the invaders returned to combat duties as a fleet-based support chapter, aiding full-strength chapters in their endeavors, with their last sighting in collaboration with the Nova Marines.
surprisingly seconding its Astartes to serve within the Death Watch despite their losses. Such Space Marines often swear oaths to destroy the craftworld Eldari, using the Death Watch as a means to hunt down their hated nemesis. Masters of achieving compliance of entire populations, their favored methods of orbital bombardment and mass Thunderhawk aerial attacks are seen by other chapters as unbecoming of an Astartes martial pedigree. Securing staging grounds with scout and tactical marines before deploying Vanguard veterans and Terminator squads, such overwhelming might purge any remaining resistance. Clad in green ceramite, adorned with golden chest aquillas, the chapter marks their tactical role with white paint on their right pauldron, using black High Gothic numerals atop such designs to identify their squad. As a Codex-compliant chapter, each Space Marine paints their pauldron trim to identify their company with the prescribed Codex colors. The symbol of their chapter, a white skull upon a white five-pointed star on a field of green, epitomizes their duty to purge the wicked from the galaxy. Subjugating rebellious planets and Xenos-infested hovels with no mercy nor restraint. Rarely is the title of a chapter so befitting as that of the Invaders. The Red Templars are a successor chapter of the Imperial Fists of unknown founding. Masters of lightning strike warfare, facilitated by their use of assault bike charges, these crimson-clad knights hurl themselves into the fray to slay the enemies of the Imperium. Gloried for their purge of the renegade Space Marine chapter, the Night Reapers, their harrowing endorsed by the High Lords of Terror, reinforced by the Minotaurs and Grey Knights, saw to their extinction where the Avenging Suns chapter of Astartes had failed. Clad in red power armor, adorned with yellow chest aquillas, the chapter marks their tactical role with white symbols on their right pauldron, using black low Gothic numerals atop such designs to designate their squad. As a Codex-compliant chapter, the Red Templars utilize its prescribed color scheme to trim their pauldrons. The symbol of their chapter, a white fleur-de-lis on a field of red, epitomizes their noble bearing. Ambushing those who have betrayed their oaths to the Emperor, these disciples of Rogel Dawn enact the will of the Imperium with relentless speed and efficiency. The Retributors are a successor chapter of the Adeptus Astartes, serving during the era Indomitus. Drawn from the gene stock of the Imperial Fists founding chapter, the warriors of the Retributors honor their lineage in their methods of waging war. Experts at shock assault and high-risk targeted strikes, the chapter operate primarily within the eastern fringe of the galaxy. Led by Chapter Master Augustus Vantor, the fleet-based chapter purged the stars of unclean Xenos and heretical rebellions, earning glory for the Imperium during 482.M39 at the War of the Ragosa Uprisings. As a Codex-compliant chapter, the Retributors eschew personal glory for battlefield effectiveness. Deployed as small impulsor squads, these highly independent contingents of the chapter are spread widely across each theater of war to allow for swift compliance. Relentless and deadly warriors, each Astartes of the chapter facilitate the commands of their squad leader to eliminate high-value targets during skirmishes and support their leaders as they breach enemy defenses. Clad in grey ceramite, adorned with a golden aquila or imperialis upon their chest, the Retributors mark out their battlefield roles with simple white paint. Bearing their chapter icon on their left pauldron, a golden skull clenched by a gauntlet, their right pauldron bears their tactical speciality, whether it be tactical, impulsor, or devastator. Their right knee plate displays their company pattern, with their squad number imposed upon the design in simple Gothic text, though all Astartes with exception to impulsor squads and veterans also denote their squad identifiers on both pauldrons with a small icon and numerals. Each Astartes bears the mark of their technical signifiers on the brow of their helmets in white, with sergeants using black and veterans of the chapter bearing the Crux Imperialis in gold. Devastators and Assault Marines coat their armor in black, requiring sergeants to change the color of their markings to red paint, whilst all officers of the chapter are honored with white helmets, pauldrons, and even decorative capes adorning their pauldron. Regarded as lost by the wider Imperium, no records exist pertaining to their continued deeds made in the name of the Emperor. Yet the Sons of Dawn do not easily die, for they shall not relent, even in the face of terrible and malevolent foes. The Shadow Wolves were a successor chapter of the Imperial Fists of unknown founding. Hailing from the planet of Varadon, these righteous warriors fought for untold millennia until their homeworld was destroyed by the Great Devourer during 987.M41. Facing a splinter fleet of the Tyranid menace, the Shadow Wolves died almost to a man as their last stand of their fortress monastery buried what remained of their legacy. Their distress call, answered by the Black Templars, the zealous Sons of Dawn arrived too late to prevent calamity. Among them, the future Reclusiarch, Merrick Grimaldus, bore witness to their bitter last stand, chanting litanies against their hated foe. Noted for their balanced combat doctrine, the Shadow Wolves, whilst retaining the tried and true teachings of the Imperial Fists, applied a more versatile array of tactics which championed survival over glorious melees. Their aggressive tendencies ultimately leading to their downfall. Their refusal to respect the strengths of their foes above their own proved fatal. Clad in purple ceramite, adorned with silver chestaquillas and pauldron trim, the chapter marks their tactical role with white paint on their right pauldron, using black numerals atop such designs to identify their squad. The symbol of their chapter, a silver wolf's head on a field of purple, marks their rugged determination and honed instincts. Their last act of defiance made against Abaddon the Despoiler's 13th Black Crusade, those not present during the last stand of their homeworld perished in glory defending the fortress world of Cadia. The Skullbearers are a successor chapter of the Imperial Fists of unknown founding. Believed to be descendants of the Executioners chapter, due to their culture of claiming the skulls of their enemies as war trophies, these fell sons of the world of Keletros delight in the primal act of killing their enemies, up close and personal. Clad in yellow ceramite, adorned with black left knee plates and chestaquillas, the chapter marks their tactical role with black paint on their right pauldron, identifying their squad using yellow high Gothic numerals atop such designs. Each Space Marine designates their company using yellow numeral stencils on their left knee plate. The symbol of their chapter, a simple black skull on a field of yellow, epitomizes their no-nonsense approach to waging war. Present during the 4th Quadrant Rebellion of the Sul-Sullied Campaign and Judgment of Helenus, these dour Astartes proved extremely effective in quelling the revolts and outbreaks of mutation within such war zones. The Sons of Dawn are a successor chapter of the Imperial Fists of unknown founding. Hailing from the feudal world of Archaea, within the Segmentum Solar, this flourishing planet is comparable to ancient Terra's Renaissance period, and burgeons with art. Their second chapter master, Alexandros the Great, famous for his liberation of several planets within proximity of the Eye of Terror from the oppression of chaos, his 6 centuries of service are lauded by all subjects of such civilizations to this day. Each and every prospective chapter master must consume the poisoned blood of Alexandros the Great, caused by the hand of Nurgle, Necrosius, which cost him his life. Their survival of such a practice, proving their constitution as a true inheritor of his mantle. Their dedication to the Master of Mankind bolstered following the Age of Apostasy. Their duty to protect the world salvaged by Alexandros became paramount following the darkest days of their legacy. Their second chapter master descended from the bloodline of Archaea. Alexandros the Mad plunged the Sons of Dawns into the depths of heresy, his corruption by the blood of Alexandros the Great subtly changing his character. Refusing to combat the forces of High Lord Goj Vandire during the Age of Apostasy, Alexandros the Mad hoped to exploit his domain's resources to burgeon the Sons of Dawn beyond the scope of a Codex-compliant chapter. Thwarted before his Dark Crusade could pillage the Segmentum Solar, Alexandros the Mad developed psychic powers said to be fostered by the Ruinous Powers, causing a cabal of his men to demand he step down as chapter master. Flaying his kinsmen with psychic lashes, civil war erupted within the chapter. The resultant conflict causing Alexandros the Mad to flee with 200 of his most loyal men into the Eye of Terror. Their homeworld harried by High Fleet Leviathan during 999.M41, their current chapter master, Alexandros the Blind, descended from the bloodline of their vaunted hero of yore, manifested his long-dormant pariah gene, and cut the hive mind's connection from its forces. Said to be destined to combat the traitor chapter master, Alexandros the Mad, as a final act of redemption, Alexandros the Blind seeks out all reports pertaining to his ancient nemesis and vows to slay him before his duty is done. Stubborn, alike to all scions of Rogel Dawn, their mastery of close-quarters combat is adapted by the cultural trappings of Archaea, which champions the Gladius as the optimal weapon. Masters of medical ingenuity, the chapter has an excess of apothecaries at hand, despite otherwise following the majority of organizational structures outlined by the Codex Astartes. Housing the deadliest diseases within their apothecarian, the Sons of Dawn study strains, such as the Destroyer Hive, in order to one day nullify such terrible afflictions. Regarded as a fleet-based chapter, the Sons of Dawn amassed their strength at the onset of Imperial Crusades, enacted by their chapter master. Unleashing drop pods and thunderhawks upon the battlefield, their battle lines supported by land raiders and rhino transports lay waste to enemy positions. Clad in black ceramite, adorned with white faceplates, left gauntlets, knee plates and chest aquillas, each Astartes marks their tactical role with white paint on their right pauldron. Designating their squad by use of red High Gothic numerals atop such designs, their company is identified with black High Gothic numerals on their left knee plate. The symbol of their chapter, a clenched white fist on a red roundlet atop a field of black, mimics their primogenitor's vaunted legacy. Upholding the deeds of their homeworld and legendary chapter master, these brothers and cousins of Archaea search far and wide to abolish their stain of dishonor from the galaxy.
Honor thy forebears, for they watch over you, even now. The Subjugators are a successor chapter of the Imperial Fists. Said to have been sired during the 23rd or 24th founding as a member of the Astartes Praesus, these warriors were created specifically to guard the Imperium from the denizens of the Eye of Terror. Hailing from the world of Xenax within the Segmentum Solar, their fervent devotion to the Imperium gives even the Black Templars pause. Destroying entire populations should the deaths of the innocent achieve conquest of their planet, the unsubtle battle doctrine of the Subjugators is nevertheless extremely effective. Gloried for their service during the Damocles Gulf Crusade, Achilles Crusade, and opposition to High Fleet Dagon within the Jericho Reach, most legendary of all their deeds is their sacrifice made during Abaddon the Despoiler's 13th Black Crusade. Initially dispatching 3 companies to defend the fortress world of Cadia, with word of the War Master's involvement, the Subjugators commit the remainder of their chapter to oppose his Black Legion. Their 3rd company destroying a Ramillies-class starfort within orbit of Cadia at the cost of many of their lives. The 1st and 5th companies suffered losses of 168 men during their defense of Casa Galan. Knowing their numbers to be low enough to threaten the extinction of their chapter, the surviving Subjugators regardless chose not to fall back and face the enemy hordes. Unable to embark upon crusades alike to their Black Templar brethren, the chapter has historically been confined to the region surrounding the Cadian Gate, on occasions dispatching a large consignment of their chapter to aid in critically important operations galaxy-wide. Attacking their foes with overwhelming firepower, the chapter eschews all forms of the subtle arts of war, such as infiltration, hit-and-run strikes, or stealth operations. Demanding only the total annihilation of their enemies, the Subjugators settle for nothing less than the devastation of not only their lives, but any resource which may renew their efforts. Abhorring any sign of weakness, and intolerant of even a hint of chaos corruption, these compassionless killers see civilian bystanders as little more than obstacles to their path to glory. Clad in green ceramite, each Astartes uses black tactical rolls on their right pauldron to mark their role. Assigning their squad with both low and high Gothic numerals atop such designs in white paint, the chapter adheres to the Codex Astartes outlined conventions of designating their company with colored pauldron paint.
The symbol of their chapter, a clenched black fist atop a field of green, honors the legacy of their Primarch and their primogenitor. Their fell reputation, causing friction with fellow Astartes, several of their creed, such as the Salamanders and Ultramarines, refuse outright to serve at their side.
The Sons of the Phoenix are an Ultima founding successor chapter of the Imperial Fists. Pious and zealous disciples of the God Emperor of mankind, the battle cants of these Sons of Rogel Dawn herald their never-ending crusades. Led in battle by their chaplain order, the Sons of the Phoenix have earned great renown within the ranks of the Adeptus Munistorum as they pave the way for the Imperial Creed to spread across the stars. Beset by the Thousand Sons warband, the Cult of Change following their first campaigns, several of their men would be used as specimens to further the arcane experiments of the Sons of the Crimson King. Renowned for their service during the Wars of Antipathy and War of Beasts, many a tale has been weaved of their valiant assaults, wreathed in holy flame, as they purge the enemies of the Imperium. Clad in white ceramite, adorned with golden chest aquillas and pauldron trim, the chapter designates their tactical role on purple insets of their right pauldron, stenciled with gold, identifying their company with golden high Gothic numerals on purple left knee plates. The chapter mimics their tactical role of their right pauldron with a smaller design which couples with their company numeral. Battle line Astartes wear white helmets, with sergeants painting a red vertical stripe on their brow, lieutenants adopting red helmets and ornate pauldron embellishments. The symbol of their chapter, a black wing protruding from a helmet adorned with lightning bolts aside a heraldic star, befits their ostentatious presentation. Their lineage as Sons of the Vigilant, brought into question due to their peers' comparative lack of gaudy regalia, whispers persist that their similarity to the traitor Legion, the Emperor's children, requires more scrutiny to be taken into their genetic forebears. Yet for now, their numbers remain scattered throughout the galaxy, with the birth of the Great Rift, the Sons of the Phoenix rallying their forces in order to continue their crusades across the stars.
This has been a tale of the Great Imperium of Man, read by the Remembrancer. The Sons of the Praetorian have stood between humanity and its extinction on countless occasions. Through acts of sacrifice, these stubborn Astartes refuse to allow the Imperium to fall while they draw breath. Life shall hurl many obstacles in your path, and it is the mark of a noble soul to overcome such trials with stoicism. For those with the strength to best such trials, guard those unable to triumph over them. Should you be gifted with strength, endurance, and intelligence, use such talents and gifts for the good of your kinsmen. For should you do such, your deed shall encourage new heroes to pick up the mantle of responsibility when your duty is done. And as the old adage says, duty is its own reward.